Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 22nd City Council of the City of St. John. And we're going to start this evening with land acknowledgement. And Councillor Stewart from Ward 4 is going to read that for us this evening. Over to you, Councillor.
The land on which the City of St. John, or Menaquest, is situated is the traditional territory of the Loyalist Way. The Loyalist Way, along with their indigenous neighbors, the Mi'kmaq and the Pescatawakate, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s that protected their rights to lands and resources.
Let us pause and reflect. I'll ask everyone to stand for the national anthem, please. City Clerk, next item, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is item 2.1, approval of minutes of July the 25th.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion for Councillor Stewart and the Deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is the approval of the agenda, and there are a number of additions from the preceding Committee of the Whole meeting. The first addition is City Market Lease Renewal with Pete's Fruitique. Next would be that's item 17.1. 17.2, consent to sublease Reversing Falls Skywalk, Inc. to Patrick Vaughn. Next is item 17.3. Ground lease for Fundy Key. And the final item is City Market Lease Renewal with True North Salmon.
All right, so I will take a motion for the approval of the agenda as amended and additions on the Deputy. And I'll take a seconder. Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Next item, disclosures of conflict of interest, if there are any.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Killen, over to you.
Item 17.1 and 17.4.
Thank you. Councillor Radwan, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm just disclosing a conflict on 17.3. I think it is.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you.
you. And Councillor Harris, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I need to recuse myself from 10.1, but I wanted to just take a few seconds here. I won't take more than a minute to reiterate why that is. I think it's important that the city have a clean outcome on this file with regards to 111 King Street. And my duty as a councillor and our duty around this horseshoe, as we've heard from our legal expert, is to provide the applicant with an unbiased process in a public hearing, no different than a judge would apply that unbiased approach to anybody who's on trial. I have been outspoken against this project. There is nothing that could be presented tonight or any other night that would say this project is a worthwhile adventure, and I have chosen to say that publicly to you and to others about this, to raise ideas, or raise awareness, about the ideas and alternatives that I see. So I will be recusing myself so that this council can make a clean, decision on this that doesn't have any opportunity for the applicant to come back with an appeal. So that's why I'm recusing myself from 10.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so I guess I'll get you to call the next item then, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. So next item is item 5 on the agenda, and it's the consent agenda.
Deputy, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move items 5.1 through to 5.13.
5.13, okay, I'll need a seconder on that. Councillor Norton? Seconder? Yes. Okay, and I'm handing it over to you there, City Manager.
Your Worship, members of Council, good evening. I do need to highlight one change within item 5.9 on consent agenda. There is a clerical error. Within the agreement is correct. To be clear, the proposed agreement is correct. However, in the staff report, the one that went out with the deck, we spoke about the possibility of the city exploring how to do reasonable efforts to prevent loitering in the facility. That was not part of the agreement. We removed it from the agreement because it is simply not feasible. You have before you an amended version of the staff report that simply removes that reference. So again, I stress the agreement is the accurate document. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Radwan, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to make a comment that, first of all, 5.2 is calling for public hearing for 1461 Loch Lomond Road, 69 Russell Street, and Wild Fox Drive and Manawaganish Road. And I just wanted to also say that I'm really excited to see everything progressing forward for Market Slip. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lowe, over to you.
13 states that it's the public spot of Market Square, and it states that the patios and the bandstand might not be put up till 23 or 24. So I'd like to comment, the commissioner to comment on that. I think it's imperative that the patios have to be up for next summer, and hopefully the stage.
Good evening, through your worship to the councillor. We do have timelines identified in the contract, and so the patios are set to be constructed this fall, and enclosures happen in the winter of 2023. And so that would be the patio areas, and that will actually provide them additional opportunity to make use of seasons that they don't currently have access to for revenue opportunities through the winter and spring months. And then with respect to the broader construction timeline, it will be 2023 with the goal of end of 2023. However, that is subject to, of course, market pressures and supply chain issues that we have been seeing in the marketplace. And with respect to the stage, we do not anticipate having that completed next summer. That would be something that would, because it will be in the heart of the construction site, it will be something that would be more towards the end of next year.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Harris?
Your Worship, I just got a question on 5.6. There's obviously, there's an active transportation fund grant agreement that we're entering into on 3 issues and I think the issues are good. I just know that this council has also talked about other issues that we would love to see addressed. So I guess, what efforts were made to consider options, like as the plans are good, I know we need them in order to know what resources to allocate where to make the streets safer, more accessible, make the neighborhoods more livable around them. But we've talked about road dieting here a lot. We've talked about narrowing streets, overall road design. So how did we narrow it down into those three for a sidewalk infill and for the other two pieces rather than the other ones that I felt we've spent a lot more time talking about it? Maybe there's something in the agreement that precluded that. I just didn't get that.
Okay, so in terms of these three projects, we do get a lot of requests from the public for crosswalks in certain locations, sidewalks in certain locations. So this will put some muster and some evidence behind which ones we should prioritize first. So that's the focus of this, is to, again, respond better to the public when we have requests for this type of infrastructure. Under other topics around, road narrowing, traffic calming, et cetera, those are a part of other plans that we're developing at the same time. For example, we'll be coming back to you probably in a month or two on final components of Phase 3 Move SJ, which actually talks about, in our general specifications, the narrowing, especially of residential streets. But certainly on the capital side, and I know in Mr. McGovern's reports, he's bringing several of them forward, especially in the uptown area, where we're looking at narrowing of roads, at the benefit of more greenery on the outside. So these are three parts of that larger Move SJ plan, and we'll continue to work each of those as opportunities come up. This is a great opportunity. It's 100% funding from the federal government for three issues that we hear a lot about from the public. So we'll resolve that through these, but lots of other work in several fronts to deal with some of the topics you brought up.
That's great. I mean, I love that we're getting funding for these plans because we need them, of course. I just didn't understand how we arrived there. So thanks.
Your worship, if I may, just to add on to that, Finance Committee will be briefed actually in 2 days' time on the draft capital plan, and in that you'll see a lot of the other things that you're referencing, Councillor Harris, including an illustration of how we are taking advantage of other share. So bilateral funding, et cetera, to help fund a lot of this. This is specific federal funding that we want to take advantage of. In addition to that, not instead of that.
Mr. O'Reilly, can I ask you a question while you're there? I'm curious about sidewalk designs. Are we restricted to the design by what, Motor Vehicle Act? Is there anything that restricts the design of sidewalks, crosswalks? Not sidewalks, crosswalks.
On crosswalks?
Yes, sorry.
So in terms of their design, we do follow national guidelines in terms of what level of protection we place, and it's all about the level of risk. In terms of their location, so I think, first of all, nothing's defined in the Act itself in terms of where to put them. In terms of locations, we obviously try to put them in places where, again, it's safe for pedestrians, right? You don't put them on curbs of the road, et cetera. Where the Motor Vehicle Act does come into play is where they are defined, especially at intersections. So any place we do have a stop sign, there's an automatic crosswalk already there defined as part within the Motor Vehicle Act. But in terms of the design and where we put them, it's basically up to city staff, in some cases with support of council, as to where to place them. And like I say, that's the purpose for this work, is to ensure we have a prioritized list of where we should be putting those investments to best protect pedestrians as they need to cross streets. And as council knows, you've all received the emails as well as I do about the number of arterial and cluttered streets that we have. And again, the best place is to put those crosswalks to protect pedestrians, and that's what this work will
Yeah,
result
you just
in.
sometimes see those sort of funky designs for crosswalks, and I don't know if they're, distraction, or if, like you mentioned, the national guidelines. The other things I was going to ask about is the infill sidewalks that we will be looking at as well. What would be our practice now? Like, would you put a sidewalk on both sides of the street, or is one sufficient in areas, or, what would guide you on the sidewalks going forward?
Well, going forward, again, it's all about the level of risk, right? So again, we do have a lot of the city that are blessed with one side or both sides sidewalk on a street. We do have a lot of areas in the city that don't have any sidewalks. And so again, this project is going to, again, from a risk-based approach, we get a lot of requests for sidewalks, is where to place those, because they are expensive to invest in, So it's going to result in where is the best bang for the buck, the best protection to pedestrians with all those requests we get for new sidewalks.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Ogden, you had a question?
Yes, Tim, one thing I found, the pain at sidewalk is psychological. In Crescent Valley, a number of years ago, I was dealing with a family that had a little girl hit by a school bus, and the kids all looked down, especially that's still going on today, as I called you about with the splash pads, right? And so I know that drivers see the stop sign, but children, I think, look down. And I know that sometimes we just put up the stop sign and not paint, but I think there's a psychological thing there with seeing the sidewalk. recently I've dealt with it when we cleaned up Reversing Falls, is that a number of people want sidewalks on each side of the bridge, especially the other side where the big Irving trucks go down the pulp mill. But I think there's something psychological there with that painted sidewalk. And I asked the kids one day down at Crescent Valley with the splash pads, and they're running back and forth. And I thought, you know, I'm going to experience this all over again, see a little kid hit. And I think that there is something to a painted sidewalk. Just a comment.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Mr. O'Reilly, I think that's it for you. I do have a question for Mark Dion, 510, if you don't mind. Mark, when I was taking a look through that kit, that 510 is the renewal for parking lease agreement with Commercial Properties, Dorchester Street. I noticed that the owner of the parking space will take 70% of the revenues, we'll keep the other 30%, but we'll be looking after the plowing, landscaping, any patching of pavement or et cetera, whatever. How old is that? Is 70-30 split, is that been like
That's
something?
been the typical standard over our contracts. Could be anywhere from 60-40, but 70-30 has been the best that we've been able to come up with.
Okay, it just seems like it'd be far more lucrative to lease it out to the city because they're going to do, maintain it with the maintenance, not only just plowing it and doing a little bit of gardening or whatever is required, but also maintaining the parking lot, so.
It's a bit of a delicate balance. We want to get the parking and get revenue for the city, and either they could take it themselves because it's their lot, or try and find some sort of revenue share agreement with us.
This is a good deal for them, I'd say. But anyways, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
All right, if there are no other questions, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, City Clerk.
Next item, Your Worship, is the public hearing. It's now a little after 6:30, and that's our advertised time for public hearings. First item on the agenda under the public hearings is 9.1, and this is a proposed rescheduling of a public hearing date for 1461 Manawaganish Road.
Thank you. I'm passing this one over to Commissioner Hamilton, please.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council, before you this evening is a recommendation from staff to reschedule the public hearing, which was originally scheduled for this evening, to consider the municipal plan amendment application for 1461 Manawaganish Road. And as indicated in the report, the new date and time is September 19th at 6:30 p.m. The rescheduling is required due to an administrative error, which occurred in the English posting of the public notice to the website, which is a legislative requirement under the Community Planning Act. And while the applicant is understanding of the error that and has indicated that the delay won't cause a significant issue for the project, staff is also recommending that the application fee be fully refunded to the applicant as well. And we are reviewing our processes to ensure this doesn't happen going forward. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Your Worship. The required motion is in the report.
Okay, so team, you have a motion in there to move for rescheduling. Councillor Harris and Councillor Killen. On the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, next item, City Clerk.
Next item under public hearings is 9.2, and this item is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 170 Charlotte Street and 13 to 19 Queen Square North.
Okay, thank you. Before I turn this one over to Jacqueline Hamilton, I'll just say for the public, so what we're going to do is the commissioner will introduce it, and then a staff member will give a very high-level presentation on this item. All of the information is in our kit for us. And then I will open the public hearing. I will ask 3 times minimum for anyone who would like to speak against the application. Then I will ask 3 times minimum for anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application. And when we're done with that, then I will close the public hearing. And then out of the public hearing sometimes comes questions, and there will be an opportunity for my councillors to ask anyone who presents a question, and then afterwards to ask staff questions that have come up maybe through listening through the public. So that's the way it will work. I just thought I would bring that forward because not everyone understands what part of what component of the whole process is at the actual public hearing. So I am going to turn it over to Commissioner Hamilton for the intro. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, before you this evening for public hearing is a zoning bylaw amendment application that was submitted by Impact Development for the property located at 170 Charlotte Street and 13 to 19 Queen Square North, located in the South Central Peninsula. The application seeks to rezone the properties from mixed commercial to urban center residential to integrated development zone, and further to amend the zoning bylaw to permit the development of a mixed residential commercial development which is fronting on Queen Square. The application has been evaluated by staff and the Planning Advisory Committee, and before you are recommendations to approve the application with conditions. And with that as an introduction, I will turn it over to Mark Reed, Senior Planner, for a staff presentation.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Just bear with me here while this loads. So the application before you this evening is for a mixed-use project. The applicant is proposing up to 150 dwelling units with approximately 6,000 square feet of commercial space. The development, although located in the parking exemption area where parking is not required, will have 36 underground parking spaces and approximately 10 surface parking spaces. The application triggers 3 required changes to our zoning bylaw. The site has to be rezoned from mixed commercial and urban center residential to integrated development. And it also triggers amendments to the height map and street wall map that were adopted as part of the Central Peninsula Secondary Plan. This is a site plan here showing the site. The proposed development would have 2 6-story buildings that would front onto Queen Square North. And then in the middle of those buildings, the existing Jewett House would be retained. In the rear of the site, there is an accessory building dubbed the Red Sheds. There would be an additional 4-story multi-unit residential constructed in the rear portion of the site, as well as surface parking. Access to the site would be from the existing access from Charlotte Street, and then the entrance to the underground parking would be from Queen Square North. This sketch here shows the massing viewed from Queen Square North. The buildings do step back, and they also step down to respect the existing built form of the Jewett residence. We have some renderings here showing the facades along the Queen Square North and Charlotte Street facades. The proposal is located in the Heritage Development Area, so it also requires the approval of the Heritage Development Board. This shows how the buildings will step down and have the massing respect the existing Jewett residence that's located in the central portion of the site. In terms of the site and neighborhood, the corner lot at Charlotte Street and Queen Square North is currently the site of a former service station. We have the Jewett residence that's located further to the east of that. It's set back quite a ways from Queen Square North. The municipal plan has this area designated as medium to high density residential. Policy LU 48 of the plan does allow for mixed use development such as this through a rezoning process, and it does provide some criteria to assess the application. The application meets a lot of these criteria, namely its location on a collector street, the walkability provided by the uptown core, and the transit access provided by the location. It also incorporates commercial frontage along Charlotte Street, which is one of the key directions for mixed-use development in the municipal plan. The project also satisfies one of the big moves identified in the secondary plan for the Central Peninsula, and that's basically completing that edge along King Square so we can get some additional infill, particularly along the northern edge and that key corner along the northern portion of Queen Square North. Staff note that the proposal conforms to both the municipal plan and the secondary plan. In terms of zoning, currently the corner parcel is zoned medium or mixed commercial with the remainder of the site zoned urban center residential. We are recommending a rezoning to integrated development, and that is a zone provided for under the Community Planning Act, which allows for a site-specific proposal such as this. The development also triggers an amendment to the Central Peninsula height map to increase the maximum permitted height in the site to 22.5 meters from 14 and 21 meters, and also an amendment to the Trinity Royal street wall height map to increase the street wall height. So basically the height of the building facade along Charlotte Street and Queen Square North from 14 meters to 15.5 meters. These amendments will allow for the design of the site to be built to a certain height, which mimics the existing heritage built form that was present on the site prior to the building demolition and also around the Queen Square district. And as well, the project will require approval of the Heritage Development Board. In terms of recommended Section 59 conditions, we do have a condition proposed with respect to a limit on the number of dwelling units and the associated commercial uses. That was originally set at 150, and then through discussions with Infrastructure Development and St. John Water, there was some additional modeling required, so that was dropped down to a cap of 120. The applicant and their consultants have provided some additional water and sanitary sewer flows that have since been modeled by St. John Water. And we are pleased to indicate that 150 dwelling units can be accommodated on the site. So staff will prepare a report with any required changes to the Section 59 conditions prior to third reading at the next council meeting. In terms of the proposed conditions, again, we're looking at limiting the scope of the development based on the water and sewer flow cap. Setting out a listing of permitted commercial uses in that commercial area on the ground floor, and requiring that the massing, or essentially the bulk and built form of the building, be as proposed in the application with a 22.5 meter height and a 15.5 meter street wall height. We're also proposing standard conditions with respect to plans to be submitted with the building permit and infrastructure upgrade costs. In terms of engagement, we sent letters to landowners within 100 meters of the site, and notice was posted on the city's website. We received 4 letters prior to the PAC meeting, and 2 adjacent property owners appeared at PAC. Their concerns primarily focused on access, parking, construction impacts, and consultation between area landowners and the developer. Staff's recommendation is to rezone the site and undertake the required amendments to the height and street wall map, and subject to recommended Section 59 conditions. And PAC did adopt that recommendation. And as I said, we will be reporting back to council prior to third reading with an amended suite of conditions to account for the updated water and sewer modeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now I will now open the public hearing, and I'll ask for if there's anyone who would like to speak against the application, to please come forward. I'll ask again if there's anyone here, or I don't think we have anyone online this evening. If there's anyone who would like to speak against the application. I'll ask again if there's anyone who would like to speak against this application. Okay, I'll ask if there's anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application. Anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application? Mr. Brito, come forward.
Good evening. My name is Keith Brito, and I'm here with my partner, Steve Bellier. It's been a long journey to work with Steve on this vision, and we worked very hard with Melissa Wakefield from EXP, who's very familiar with the city, the plan, and the heritage bylaws. We did our best to build and design, I should say, a really, I think, high-quality development that fits very well with the surrounding neighborhood, retaining the Jewett residents. I think a lot of developers might shy away from that, but Steve and I believe that it's very important that, down the road when this project is complete, that we can drive by and feel good about what we've built. So we do take quality, obviously, very seriously, and, we're looking forward to this project. It's a great site. It'll be very good and beneficial to the community. The density obviously is very important. As everybody knows, with the affordable housing crisis, adding more units to the uptown is going to be a good thing, be a great return on investment for city infrastructure, and it's a very walkable neighborhood. So we think there's going to be a lot of people that do not have vehicles as well that would prefer to live uptown and maybe don't have to have a car, or can take advantage of the city transit system or the bicycle lanes, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to share that. Obviously, I'm in favor of it and look forward to executing on the project.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Brito? Councillor Hickey?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just through you to Keith. Thanks very much for bringing this forward, Keith. I think the time that you put in shows, why there was crickets when the mayor asked for the folks speaking against this project. I think it's a testament to the work that was put in here. I think it also is a really good example of how you can protect heritage and you can protect existing infrastructure while building high density, quality units beyond that. You mentioned affordable housing. Can you elaborate a little bit on its incorporation into this project?
Yeah, for sure. Steve and I, we branded the company Impact for a reason, because we do want to make a positive impact on the community. And we see this being one project of many projects. We do understand that affordable housing issue, and we think it's only going to get worse with the rising cost and interest rates rising, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things we're looking at doing is making some of the units smaller. That's why we actually decided to go maybe up to 150 units. We think if some of the units are a little bit smaller, they're going to be a little bit more affordable. There's only so much you can do on the cost side of things. So, the natural tendency that we've seen anywhere in the world is, sometimes they're just a little smaller. I think a lot of people sometimes would just like to be uptown. They don't need a big unit or a downtown in any city. They'd like to be there. So they don't need 1,000 square feet. Maybe they can live with 600 square feet. So I think one of the strategies that we're adopting here is to maybe make some of the units a little bit smaller and affordable. There is some great programs that CMHC is offering that can really allow us to offer a defined affordable housing unit, such as, say, under $1,200 is CMHC's definition for affordable housing. Still sounds like a lot of money, but for any new unit that's being built, it's very hard to charge less than, say, $1,200. So we think that program will help us hopefully add some affordable housing to the project. However, the rising cost environment, like I said, and shortage of labor and rising interest rate environment, all those headwinds are going to make it harder to build more units and make it challenging. So although we're not ready to commit to say, yes, we're going to build, CMHC defined affordable housing units, we do have full intentions on doing our best to offer those. We just want to make sure the project's viable is number one. And number two is if we can add some affordable housing to this project, we will.
You made up of that?
Really hard to say at this point. A lot of it's going to come down to the economics, and a big factor is cost. And there's a lot of cost, and there's really a formula at the end of the day. You just want to make sure that at the end of the day, the project's not worth less than what it costs you to build it. If you commit to building too many affordable housing units, then all of a sudden you could be upside down on a project and having, really, really poor return on investment, which makes it that much harder to build a second building. The good thing about either way, whether a developer adds a true, say, 20 units affordable or defined as affordable, the fact that we're going to get more construction, I think, is the first thing we need to do, is make sure that we just build as much as we can possibly build, because one of the best ways to reduce the increase in rising rents is to add more supply to the market. If we have more supply and similar demand, if demand stayed the same or rose lower than the supply, then we should see pressure on rents to not increase. Otherwise, landlords won't be able to rent their units because somebody would choose a unit down the street that's a little bit more affordable. So I think we need to, hopefully as a community, just build as much as we can possibly build. And then number two, if we can actually, earmark so many to affordable, then obviously that's going to be another good step as well.
When do you expect to see shovels?
Okay,
Oh,
finish that
sorry,
one
Your
off.
Worship.
I'm just trying to keep you to your 3 minutes,
No, that's
Councillor.
good.
If you want to answer that, though, when do you expect to see shovels in the ground? I'm curious.
Well, hopefully it'll be within the next year, but right now is kind of like the perfect storm for developers.
Exactly.
I've been to many real estate conferences and listening to the biggest players in development, and it's like everything's kind of going against the development community right now. Labor shortages, cost increases, supply chain issues, rising interest rate environment. They're all negatives. The good positive for St. John, obviously, is people are wanting to move here. We're growing our population. We're going in the right direction. It feels really good. We get a lot of momentum. But it seems like there's a lot of headwinds for the development industry. So before we commit to anything, we're going to make sure that the numbers add up. And then hopefully we'll break ground sooner than later.
Thanks. Councillor Harris should be up next, but his mic is counting down right now, so I don't know if you can reset that for me. Okay, Councillor Harris.
Sure, thank you. Keith, I think it goes, sorry, through you, Your Worship, to Keith. I think it goes without saying this is a great spot, great opportunity for the company and for us to really realize the dream of the Central Peninsula plan. It's a big game-changing spot there. It's been underutilized for a long time. And I do want to plug, our new Affordable Housing Investment Fund. Am I getting that right, City Manager? Is that what we've called it? Close enough. Because I'm forgetting that. We do have our own in-house contribution we want to make available to developments like this. The province has them. I know you guys will do your homework, and if you can come up with some extra funding to make some of these units affordable, you will. But you're doing a lot of really soft things well. You're shrinking the footprint, which is what every other city in the world has done to solve this problem. And you're eliminating parking spaces in a place where there's a huge value proposition to not own a car. And to save yourself $15,000 a year as an expense or so. So I think that's kudos to you guys, and I really, I really hope this goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Redwan.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Burrito. Thank you for this. I found it so interesting, and there's so many people that talk about other cities building new around heritage, and I think this is a great maybe first example for St. John. I have a couple of questions, and I don't know how much you're able to answer them as the plan goes right now. First of all, I'm just wondering if you have any idea roughly how many units would be like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom studio?
Sure. Our plans right now with the 120 units that we set forth, we're about a 50-50 split, ones and twos, with the exception of we added 11 townhouse units. So we do understand as well that there's a shortage of family-based units, 3-bedroom units. So we're very aware of that issue, and there's a reason why a lot of developers wouldn't build them, likely because sometimes there's 3 roommates, a lot of turnover, could be damage, et cetera, et cetera. We are hopeful that the city will be successful in getting a school in the South Central Peninsula, which means that there should be more families that want to live on the peninsula close to the school, in which case, we want to make sure that we have housing for those families. So introducing 11 townhouse type units on Queen Square North, as well in the courtyard, where kids can play in the backyard and, kind of get raised or be raised in the city, kind of like I was in the North End or Steve was in the South End. We talk about the experience growing up in the city where you had backyards and you had the kids playing. We don't have a whole lot of that right now, so we're also going to introduce 11 townhouse units. And then we're going to have some smaller studio type units as well, which are the more affordable, a little bit smaller, but they're great for professionals, people that want to, live, work, and play uptown.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, we are singing that song about the school in the Central Peninsula. We're all singing it around the table. So hopefully that will come to fruition sooner than later. I'm also wondering about accessibility. So how many units? I mean, obviously some of them have to be accessible, but do you plan on having an elevator in the building? How many might be accessible?
Yeah, we will have 2 elevators. There's a city requirement to have 1 per 20 apartments. So if we have 120, we're definitely going to have 6. But I don't see a reason why we wouldn't want more than that. I don't see much of an issue with those accessible units. The countertops are a little lower, yes. You have to have areas for people in wheelchairs as well, which is convenient for them. Light switches have to be lower. A lot of those issues or changes really aren't much of an issue for people. So we do, I get inquiries every once in a while, do you have an accessible unit, et cetera, et cetera. And, we have a few, probably 5 or 10 in our portfolio, but I know we need more. And I can't see why we wouldn't want to introduce a few more extra accessible units as well. And plus, we have been in conversations and discussions with key industries across the street. There are people that obviously we just don't have good housing for them. So even having them across the street might be a good opportunity for us to introduce some more accessible units.
That's great, Mayor. I have a couple more, but I can come back around.
Thank you. Councillor Ogden.
Keith, I want to congratulate you. You mentioned about the winds of interest rates and such against developers and labor, but big cities are losing population and rural areas are losing population, and people are moving to smaller cities for safety in that urban metro area. So I think we have that going for us. But one thing that I hope that you put in, because density lowers taxes and urban sprawl actually drives up taxes, which I hope the province can get their head around that. But we need a new school in the North End and the South End, and I think that will add, and these have been promised for decades. But one thing too is that I've spent much of my life working with people living in poverty, and they love to live in walking neighborhoods. The North End is a walking neighborhood and will become even more so when we do what we do to Main Street. And the South End definitely is one. So I think the more density and the more affordable housing you can, Key Industries is a perfect example. I was there today, and there's a fair amount of people being educated in there. So I want to congratulate you because density is extremely important. And even these families that we're getting from Afghanistan and Syria and Ukraine, is the immigrants and refugees have larger families than Canadians do. And so that extra 1, 2, 3 bedroom, I noticed it down in Crescent Valley, there's hundreds of kids running the streets. Most of them are immigrants and refugees. So I want to congratulate you there, and I want you to start to move to the North End, okay?
Thank you, Councillor.
We hope so too.
Councillor Radwan, did you have another question?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Brito. I mean, I know it might be difficult to kind of answer this kind of question, but I'm just wondering from start to finish, any idea with all the constraints right now in the market, supply chain issues, labor issues, any idea how long it would take if you were to start this to start building and to finish the build actually?
So building like this, there's obviously a fair amount of uncertainty right now. That's like the key word for the last 2 years is uncertainty. Doesn't seem like it's getting any less uncertain right now. So typically you'd expect a project like this to take 2 years. And with the supply chain issues we've seen other projects that were supposed to be 2 years and end up being a lot longer. So I don't want to be naive and think that somehow we're going to be able to fix all those issues, but there are some challenges to address the supply chain issues. You need to purchase goods much earlier in a project. Requires a lot of extra capital. So sometimes to get around some of these issues, you need to finance a lot more, put a lot more capital into the project. I think right now, the best guess I would say is to see how things change over the next 6 months. We're definitely not going to be putting a foundation or shovels in the ground this year. We just don't think that's realistic. We need to do more detailed design and plans. We need to figure out our budget and our cost. And then we need to let the supply chain issues kind of work themselves out. Obviously the war in Ukraine is driving up energy costs, shipping costs are high. That's having an impact on cost overall and inflation. So the Bank of Canada is doing their best to drive down inflation. It's still going to be elevated for the next year and a half, I suspect. So it'd be very hard for me to give you an exact time, but I could say that, typical project like this, that would have been 2 years, could easily be 2.5, based on some of these bottlenecks.
And it was nice to see that this would be potentially mixed use. So, I mean, I'm sure from your perspective, the sooner that you would have a tenant wanting to go into a 100-seat restaurant, the better. And so I wish you all the best if this goes through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no more questions, but I'll ask you one if you don't mind. What I guess I'm hearing mostly on the ground is parking, because you're building this unit in a car-centric city, and you know that. And we have waived those parking requirements. But how many spots, when I looked at through the plans there, how many spots will this take over? Like, there's quite a bit of parking that will be deleted just because of the building.
Yeah, there's probably 25 spaces there that are kind of used right now. Not all of them are tenants. Some of them are tenants. Mm-hmm. Some of them are people that work at various different companies uptown as well. Our thinking is that there's a couple challenges. One is if we try to introduce too much parking, it drives up the cost. And if we hit rock, it's going to create a very, difficult situation for us in terms of making this project viable. Having said that, if we run into a situation where we can add more parking, the 46 spots that we are including, which aren't required, but we know we want parking, that would be the minimum number of parking spaces that we're going to add, 46 minimum. And, maybe we add 10, 20 more spots. It could be on a second level or something, but that's going to come at a cost of eliminating apartments. So, we have a shortage of apartments, we have a shortage of parking, fortunately. We never used to have these issues, but these are obviously growing pains. The great thing of living uptown is you can walk to work, and you don't need a vehicle. And Steve and I are discussing the possibility of adding a couple cars as well that are ours that the residents would use. That, if they want to go to a grocery store, if we don't have a grocery store in the next few years, if they don't want to go to the city market, maybe they use one of our vehicles, and it's a car sharing program. So a lot of people have vehicles, but they sit there for out of 168 hours a week. They sit there about 165 or 160. So they only need a car once in a while. So the bonus of living uptown is you get to live, work, play. You don't have to worry about driving home. You can have a couple drinks, walk down the street, go to bed, you're fine. The other, obviously, point, as well as you're aware, is the public transit system. King Square, there's no better place to catch a bus than King Square, right, which is only 2 blocks away. And, hopefully we will see people adopting more of city transit. And then the bicycles, we see a lot more, discussions and investment in bicycle lanes, and we understand that Charlotte Street is going to be hopefully turned into a complete street with bicycle lanes as well. So all these things, ride sharing, Uber, the idea of everybody owning a vehicle, I think, is slowly disappearing. People will pay for the kilometer or per use, and people will share vehicles. There'll be more ride sharing. All these things are changing very rapidly, so we don't feel like we need much more parking than that.
Yeah. No, listen, they're excellent problems to have. I agree with you. And we've talked about it with the city manager, and he's going to actually chime in on this, because you get that little bit of pushback from people as they get nervous about. So it's probably time for us to take a look at that too. So City Manager, I'll pass that over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for members of council awareness, things have obviously changed on the South Central Peninsula since the last time we developed a robust, exhaustive parking plan, parking program for the peninsula. Therefore, I'm pleased to announce this evening that as part of Work Plan 2023, we will have a specific work plan item where we will conduct a fundamental review of the parking needs for the South Central Peninsula over the next decade and how best to address those needs. Mr. Brito has highlighted a number of considerations that need to go into the fold in terms of what is the true parking need, and we need to do the analysis to what we have available and what sort of programs and or policies we need in place, and we will review everything from rates to alternate side parking to the whole thing, a truly fundamental review. That will take us many months to do. So we'll do it sometime in 2023, which is still before most of the major new developments receive occupancy or certainly full occupancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you do have a beautiful piece of property. You have a great project. So I really thank you for being here tonight. It was great to have your voice here at the table and just to get a few of your thoughts out here to all of us.
Thank
Appreciate
you for
it.
having me.
Thank you. So I'll ask once more if there's anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of the project. And that's my third call. So I will now close the public hearing. And I'll ask my team if anyone has any questions for staff. And if no one has any questions for staff, then Councillor Redwan, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I do have a question. So through you two, I'm not sure if it would be Commissioner Hamilton. I am wondering, actually it is about parking. I am wondering if we have any idea how many spaces that we have available in the Central Peninsula core, especially once some of these parking spaces are gone.
We'll have to. Go ahead, Mark.
I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I saw you there, so it's great.
Good evening, Your Worship, through you to the councillor. What I can tell you right now is in that particular zone for residential parking, we have 300 spots allocated. 270 permits have been issued so far this year.
Okay. All right. So there's no wait list, because I know years ago I used to be put on a wait, I was put on a wait list. So there's no wait list for parking right now.
There is not.
So that's great news. And I just have a quick comment. I mean, I know and I respect that this is the process of doing all of this through the public hearing and with the Heritage Board. But what I'd like to say is that I think for the sake of the public hearing, what I'd love to see in the future is that staff comes, they have their report, PAC comes, they have the report, and we also have the report from Heritage and what they thought about the project, because this is still going to go to Heritage. And so I would just love to see that, because I think anybody who wants to speak in favor or against, it would be really great for them to have that information and that insight from Heritage too. Just my 2 cents on it.
Thank you. All right, so I will take a motion then, or wait now. First I have to close the public hearing. Then I have to ask, we'll need over to you, City Clerk.
Your Worship, in this public hearing, we require 2 motions to proceed. Approval of first reading by title and approval of second reading by title.
Okay, so I'll take a motion for approval of first reading by title. Councillor Harris and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
And I'll take a motion to approve second reading by title. Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Congratulations, Mr. Brito. You're good to spend your cash.
Not yet. Third reading.
Oh, third reading, sorry. Thanks for being here. All right, next item, City Clerk.
Next item, Your Worship, is 9.3 on the agenda, and this is another public hearing for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 100 Boar's Head Road.
I'm passing this one over to Commissioner Hamilton as well.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you this evening for public hearing is a rezoning application, which was submitted by Rehabitat Incorporated for municipal property located at 100 Boar's Head Road. And it's located in the city's north end in the Milledgeville suburban intensification area. The application is seeking to rezone the property from utility service to mid-rise residential in order to permit the development of a 12-unit affordable housing development located on surplus municipal lands adjacent to the city's Works Depot. The application has been evaluated by staff and the city's Planning Advisory Committee, and before you are recommendations to approve the application with conditions. And with that introduction, I will turn it over to Jennifer Kirchner, our Manager of Community Planning, for a staff presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. I'm very pleased to be before you this evening to introduce this item for public hearing. The application is located at 100 Boar's Head Road, so this was a recycle depot until recently. We do have a very basic proposal layout for you to look at. The proposed application would provide 12 different affordable housing units ranging from a single bedroom to 3-bedroom, and would be located very tightly on the property. This property did undertake a environmental site assessment as part of the purchase agreement undertaken between the city and Rehabitat to determine the appropriate site location based on former uses. So the site plan you see indicates where the building would need to be structured. We do have some lovely renderings. So the property is fairly unique. It is surrounded by vacant or underutilized land that's traditionally been utility service as opposed to residential. So this would create an opportunity to transition these sites into a more suitable and compatible element in the neighborhood. The proposed design undertaken by EXP ranges in height from 2 to 3 stories and does undertake kind of a modern looking design. They have included elements including a rooftop deck, which you can see the lovely little people standing on top. And they will feature a variety of landscaping to help soften the appearance from the street. Just another rendering. So the building will be built into the topography of the site. There is some pretty interesting changes in elevation, and the building will take advantage of that. So this is the subject site location. As you can see, it's located on Boar's Head Road, very close to the intersection with Millage Avenue. This location does provide the future tenants with easy access to public transit, including some of our more major transit routes, so easy access to different services they may need, along with opportunities for employment in the vicinity. It is located within our low to medium density residential neighborhood within our municipal plan. So it is an area where this type of development would be viewed as appropriate and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So there are existing single family residential up to multi-unit located more to the north of the site. The zoning in the area is fairly diverse with utility service properties, as well as ranging from lower density residential into the medium density residential community service uses and commercial uses in the surrounding area as well. Just a few images of the location. It is currently fenced, and there is a quasi berm located along the street frontage that does create a bit of a interesting viewpoint. Would have been to mask the existing uses. So staff did review this, and PAC did vote unanimously in favor of staff recommendation, which is to approve the rezoning and to impose 5 Section 59 conditions. So that would range from a maximum of 12 units, and the remaining items are some of our standard conditions related to engineering of stormwater, detailed building design, site plan and elevations, and if any municipal infrastructure improvements are required to be at the cost of the owner or developer. And the applicant is here if there are any questions for them. Letters were sent. 3 letters were received in opposition. Opposition largely related to not wanting to see increased residential density in the area or to utilize city-owned land for recreational or cultural uses, such as an arena or a community center.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I will open the public hearing, and I'll ask if there is anyone here who would like to speak against the project. I'll ask again if there's anyone here who would like to speak against this project, or the application, I guess I should say. I'll ask for a third time if there's anyone here who would like to speak against this application. I don't think we have anyone online or anything tonight. So I'll ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Ms Wakefield with EXP Architects. I'm the consultant behind the design presented to you this evening, and I'm here speaking on behalf of my client, Rehabitat. I really just want to underscore really the 2 primary wins I think that this project provides to the community. Number 1, this is an incredibly underutilized site, and it's, in addition to that, an incredibly challenging site. I'm sure as your agenda packet indicates, this is a contaminated site with a very small area of usable land that would certainly be a barrier to any kind of development, really. And so the building has been very strategically placed to leverage the best portion of the site without the potentially project damaging costs of remediation of the soil. Number 2, there's a large scarcity of affordable housing in this neighborhood, and the ability to put 10 to 12 affordable units in this neighborhood in a lovely, well-situated residential neighborhood that has all of that access to public transit, et cetera, is another great win. And certainly very proud to be supporting Rehabitat in their efforts to develop this property.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Wakefield tonight? Councillor Harris is up.
Thanks for that. It's a great project. I'm really happy to see it here tonight. I know that there's a fairly big swath of land here, and from what I'm gathering, this is probably the largest footprint we could achieve for housing density on this. The rest of it would probably be more or less inaccessible for that. Is that what I'm gathering?
Yes, effectively the footprint of the building is precisely the maximum extent of usable land based on environmental site analysis and boreholes to review the contaminated soil. It's quite substantially contaminated, and this one little area is the best candidate without very significant remediation work being involved.
And are we aware, I guess, in your work, are you aware of any concerns of putting a residential unit like this near soil of that such contamination? I know a lot of the time the contaminated soils are, they're locked, they're landlocked, they're not a hazard to people, but I'm sure you guys looked over that, so is that something that you can share with us, how that went? Or?
Yeah, so geotechnical assessment was completed, and the nature of certainly the uppermost contaminants, as I understand it, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, but it's a kind of contaminant known as hydrocarbons, and a lot of that will be remediated just solely through the process of excavation for the foundations and whatnot, and within the area that we will be building in specifically, it's within acceptable levels also, and then any of the other landscaping work, adding trees and grass and whatnot will go a long way to also help encapsulate anything that remains.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hickey.
Thanks, Your Worship. To you to Melissa. Geez, you're getting double billables today. That's
I know,
pretty
I've
good.
actually got 3 projects here tonight.
this is, I think I'm just more of commending you and your team for this, and certainly the folks at Rehabitat. I think I speak for all of council when I say, we need more affordable housing and we need it now. And I think we all understand the crisis we're in and how much bigger that crisis is becoming as we continue down the road we are. And I hope we take massive steps to fix that and to remediate the situation we're in now. This is part of that, and hopefully that continues, and hopefully I know Rehabitat understands that, and certainly I will be bringing it up the next time we have a family event, which we normally do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Redwan.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Ms. Wakefield. Just wondering, of course, I think that it's only required to have one accessible unit in a building like that. Will there be any others?
I would have to defer that question specifically to my client. I think it relates to their funding.
Sure.
We do have the requirement to have a minimum of 25% accessible. And so typically what we will do is as many as we possibly can if it exceeds the 25%. So typically we would have all ground floor units accessible.
Okay, that's wonderful. And any idea of the price points as the market stands right now? Do you have any ideas? I mean, and that certainly could change because the market is changing a lot.
Yeah, these are 100% affordable. So they'll be all rent geared to income, 30% of gross monthly income for each resident.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ogden?
Have you had any discussions with the staff about finishing the sidewalk there? I get a lot of calls about finishing that sidewalk to bring you out to the bus stop.
We haven't had any specific discussions to date. We're obviously very early in the planning process and wanting to get through those hurdles. But yes, I think certainly to deal with the pedestrian access and even just coming and going from the proposed parking location, we will need to develop a sidewalk.
Because the sidewalk's not finished to Milledge Avenue. It's quite a distance, and there's
it's
seniors
across the
living there.
street. Yeah.
And the other thing is the area that's, so it's going to be irrigated, is it? You're going to put in trees and everything to help reclaim part of that soil?
Yes, that's right. I mean, ideally, the parking, as proposed, the parking is off to the side of the property, leveraging an area that's unbuildable. Ideally, we would love to see it moved to the back of the property, just so it is less visible from the street. If it remains as proposed, I guess pending more detailed design, every effort will be taken to add some landscaping as required by the zoning to obscure the view of the parking from the street.
So you're putting parking on there to fix part of the non-usable land. But is it the city's problem of putting the landscaping together on the other piece of land? Because you're not really buying it, are you? The other piece of land that's associated with it?
I can't specifically speak to that myself.
No, I don't. Yeah, that's sort of out of scope. Who's going to do the landscaping on the other piece of land? Because I don't know who owns the other piece of land.
Oh, okay. And one thing that you're solving is, I get a lot of calls on, is the salt that used to run off there from the depot. Those people are pretty pleased that we're calling, that you're building, the phone calls I got. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's good to
Thank
hear.
you, Councillor.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions for you, but you've got an interesting design there, very Scandinavian looking, and nice piece of property. Like you mentioned, it's very accessible to the bus lines, et cetera. So, yeah, interesting project. Thank you. All right, so I will call, I will call again if there's anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the application. I'll ask again if there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application. So I will, yes, I'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask my team if they have any questions for staff. No questions for staff. Over to you, City Clerk, for motions.
Thank you, Your Worship. For this item, 2 motions are required, first reading by title and second reading by title.
Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve first reading by title. Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Norton on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
And I'll take a motion to approve second reading by title. Councillor Norton and Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. You're on your way, but not quite. Thanks. Okay, City Clerk, next item.
Next item we had passed over, and that would be item 6, members' comments.
Okie dokie. Hang on here. Consent agenda. Members' comments. I like to say this is a speed round. Your mic is going to say 3 minutes. You've got 2. Councillor Harris, you're kicking us off.
Quick one, Your Worship, just some more trophies coming back to the city. The senior women's A team and the under 17 women of the St. John's Rugby Trojans did win the provincial championship, so they're bringing back some more titles to the city. So good for them. And just recognizing our good friends at the theater company who have put on a community barbecue this week out of the Fringe Festival thing off Horsefield. It was great. I heard it was well attended, and definitely saw some people come to that myself. And so it's always good to see that community spirit. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks, Your Worship. I had the pleasure of representing our province coaching sailing for the last 8 days at the Canada Games in Niagara. And just from our city to theirs and that whole region, they put on a fantastic show. A little bit of foreshadow with the games coming to the province in 2029. Would love to see them back in St. John. Out of the games, though, we had many athletes from St. John and many volunteers in different functions. Ran into Bill McMacken, and we had a wonderful conversation about sport because Bill's heavily involved in track. But for those who haven't been around St. John for a long time, he's also one of the leading forces around the field house out at Exhibition Park. And if you go back a little ways, we had a wonderful conversation about the start of Harbor Passage because Bill was involved with waterfront development way back when. And, I'm giving a shout out to Bill both in his coaching role and to all the coaches, but also he's a great representative. St. John does well, and why do we do well at things? It's not just the folks sitting here. We wouldn't be able to do it all. The volunteers, and he's one of them who's never run for elected office. He just does stuff. And we have so many people like that in St. John. Just make sure when you run into them, give them a thanks. On the other side of sport, unfortunately, in this past week, St. John lost David Nicholson, who was with the LBR for over 30 years. And anybody involved in sport in St. John over the history of time would know Dave Nicholson. So that is a loss for our community, and certainly our condolences to his family and friends. I talked about Maiden all summer. Well, Maiden left just before the Canada Games started. But super thank you to DP World, who is sponsoring their 3-year tour around the world. Maiden is the Whitbread Around the World race yacht that's all crewed entirely by women. Women on the Water in St. John got teamed up with them for 10 days. And not only was it a fantastic time in St. John, but even the spillovers from that visit we are seeing. At Canada Games, they had a women's meeting about having more women involved in sport. St. John reps got talking about Maiden. They have made some connections. One of our St. John athletes, because they do this, I guess now, got one of those snap face messages or something from the now skipper of Maiden, who they met and said, you know what, I heard they're doing an ocean race and training camp, and I think you would be great for it. Can we connect you? So just thanks to everybody involved at DP World and the port who brought that into town. And, certainly finally, it's a new world. Make sure you're being safe, you're being polite, wash your hands, and respect those who may be immunocompromised and need a little more safety around them. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Ogden, over to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank One Change. They had a graduation on Saturday afternoon on a really, really hot day, and for people in marketing technology. And it went over very, very well, and One Change to organize that through the community college. And I just want to thank them. It was great to attend. And a lot of those people said they stand up and they stand proud, and I don't think there's anything better to hear in St. John than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey?
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to take a moment to congratulate the team at Coverdale. We secured $3.6 million for their development in Waterloo Village. This will offer 12 transitional units for women in the community, which will likely be filled very quickly. As we know, at every point in our housing continuum, we are in crisis. Homelessness across the province is up 66%. Anecdotally, you can look around the city and see the impact that that is having on our communities, whether it's the tents popping up in the Loyalist burial grounds, the tents featured at the end of, at the park at the end of Charles Street, whether it's in any neighborhood in our community, we are starting to see them. And I think that is an absolute tragedy, and I think it's our job to make sure that that continues to get addressed. And I think it's our job to step up on advocacy when it comes to affordable housing. I think it's our job to make sure our affordable housing action plan is put into place as quickly as possible, and we take the actions that we've listed in there. And I think it's also our job to encourage as much radical change when it comes to housing across every government counterpart that we can, so that we can see these issues addressed. The province of New Brunswick has a set goal of building 1,200 affordable units across the province over the next 10 years, or 4 years. Those 1,200 units in St. John right now wouldn't even meet the demand that we have for them. We need targets changed. We need this crisis to be addressed by every level of government, and I'm hoping that we can be the advocates to pull them together and to make it happen for our communities. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, I'd also just say a longtime fixture of our community, Howard May, passed away, so our condolences to his family.
Thank you. Councillor Norton?
Just bear with me, I'll try to get this in 2 minutes. If you're considering a move to St. John, there's really just one thing you need to know, that residents have a history of being the happiest people in Canada, according to the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. Why is that? Might be the people who are friendly, warm, and welcoming. Might be the location on the stunning Bay of Fundy, or it could be that it's the perfect mix of urban energy, fun outdoors, and creative vibes. There are world-class arts, culture, food, and sport that combine into an incomparable lifestyle that is also unbelievably affordable. If you dream of home ownership, that can be your reality in St. John far quicker than in other cities in Canada. The historic Uptown neighborhood rewards explorers with beautiful streetscapes lined with gorgeous old buildings that house some of the city's most dynamic businesses. For centuries, people near and far have made a home for themselves here, and people today continue to realize the same thing. That is but 2 paragraphs of what would be 10 out of the executive brief published by KBRS in their search for the superintendent for Anglophone South School District. It's a quick reminder to us that oftentimes the grass may look greener on the other side, but that is one job advertisement that has gone far and wide in terms of a global advertisement, encouraging people to look right here in St. John and what it has to offer. I encourage you to check out the rest of that advertisement as part of the executive brief for the ASDS superintendent published by KBRS. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor, and thanks for bringing that to us. Good reminder. Councillor Killen, you're up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to put a plug out there for anyone interested. There's a group organizing on the West Side to put on the 2023 West Side Days. So it's been a little bit dormant since COVID. So the group has been meeting at the Legion, and they're looking for volunteers, people to pitch in. So hopefully to make this 2023 year for West Side Days a grand return. I also was able to take in the Loyalist Burial Ground project, and I want to tell people about this show. So they take you on a tour of St. John. It's 4 young actors. There's a lens around the Black Loyalists, around BIPOC experiences in St. John over the history of the city. There's stories about statues I had no idea about. Like, it's just phenomenal. And they really interact with you and come in and out of different corners of the city to surprise you with different characters. It's just phenomenal. My son, who's 10 years old, really enjoyed it. And there's folks there like well into their 60s and 70s also loving it. So it really is something for all ages. And you will learn something different about St. John that you did not know, I promise you. And then last thing I just want to shout out is our big debut at Pride this year, and thank the Pride Planning Committee that was put together to submit a float on behalf of the city of St. John. We invited out fellow mayors and councillors to join us. We all, it was super hot, it was super colorful, it was just so loving. And a lot of folks said afterward they really felt, like St. John is becoming this safe space for the queer community, and they really, really felt it that day and during the whole week. It was so amazing. So thanks to St. John Pride, to Chroma, to Adoringly Shire, to everybody who threw in a float for this grand celebration. It really made me super proud to be a St. Johner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to piggyback on Councillor Killens, I've never seen such a large parade in the city of St. John that wasn't like a Christmas parade or something. We were down almost to 5:06, and there was still people at the top of King Street coming down. So it was an amazing turnout. Another note, I was pleased to attend the United Colors of Fashion event this weekend in the mayor's absence to bring greetings on behalf of council. What an event that was. There was all kinds of designs from all over, designers from all over the world that live here in St. John right now. And the winner was Anna Dysart. She's a 16-year-old high school student. But what phenomenal designs they had. So I want to congratulate Anna on behalf of council this evening. Another event this weekend that I attended was the Sunshine Summer Program. It came to an end, and the city puts on this program for kids. And they go all over the city, and they'd have a Dominion Day where they'd spend time in Dominion Park, or the Res Day out in the Res. And these kids, I saw pictures and videos, happiest kids in the world. It's just phenomenal what these programs do for the kids. So I want to congratulate Lynn Kane and her department and all those students, university students that just love what they're doing all summer long. It's so good for everybody. Not to forget too that our community centers do much the same. They help out the kids in the community. They have summer programs that go above and beyond. So I want to congratulate all of them, and as well in Crescent Valley, the Resource Center down there, doing an amazing job. So it's been quite a summer for all those kids. Great place to live in St. John. We got a lot of things going on for kids here. A lot of parks. I have a new neighbor who couldn't believe that we had over 9 parks. Moncton's got 2 or 3. So, lots to do in St. John, and I just want to congratulate them on a successful summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor. So for anybody who wants something to do in the next couple of weeks, of course, the Moonlight Bazaar is coming on August the 27th. And right now going on is the Fundy Fringe Festival, and that's going to be going right up until the 27th. As well, of course, it's great to stop down to Sculpture St. John to see how they're progressing down there. And you can keep popping in as they keep changing all of the beautiful granite, making it some beautiful artwork. Also, Big Brothers Big Sisters has their book sale going on, and that's going on in Brunswick Square until the 27th as well. So you can give to a great charity and get some good reading material down there too. And St. John's Sea Glass Festival is actually happening in Market Square on August the 27th. And if you're not sure where to find out what's going on in St. John, my little tip for you is to check either Uptown St. John or Discover St. John, which is now Envision, their website, and you can check out their calendar events. I just wanted to send out a special thank you to Jason Innes, who has just formed the first Lakewood Heights Association, and he is trying to rally the community together to start doing some community events and different plans. So if you haven't connected with him, please do so. And if you need some help connecting with them, certainly get in touch with me, 977-3846. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So you always get a great smattering of what's been happening and what is going to be happening in the city from all my team here. But it's been wild. We've got 506 Pride Parade, Container Village, Third Shift, Fringe. I actually had a chance to go on the Maiden. That was fantastic. You had the United Colors of Fashion, Moonlight Bazaar, Sculpture, the Sea Glass. I need a break from fun. It's we've had a month without a council meeting, so over that month, we've all been running to all of these amazing things that are happening in the city right now. And so it's been a lot of fun. So we do have lots going on. I've gotten more compliments on the city this summer, I think, than I've ever gotten. Now, the weather helps. It's been different weather this summer. It's been very nice and warm. But the Container Village is a huge hit for us. I find I get everywhere I go, people mention that. So it's really been great. So that wraps it up for us for members' comments. City Manager, you wanted to make a...
Yeah, Your Worship,
brief
members of
announcement?
council, members of the public in particular, just an administrative announcement before we continue with the agenda. There was a large amount of money found in one of the council seats this evening. If that money happens to be yours and you've lost it, please reach out to the city clerk's office. And if obviously you can identify what I'm talking about, then we'll make the necessary handoff. But again, there was a large amount of money, presumably accidentally left in a seat. And please reach out to the city clerk's office if you have a claim on that money. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Actually, I might take a motion for a 5-minute break. I need a drink of water. Should we do that? Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 5 minutes, folks.
I'm going to take a guess.
Order in the court. Can I call the meeting back to order, please? This is what happens when you take one council meeting off. There's all this socializing that's got to be done. Okay, City Clerk, over to you for the next item. Where
Thank
are
you,
we?
Your Worship. Next on the agenda, under item 8, delegations, we have item 8.1, and it's a presentation from the St. John Theatre Company.
I'm passing this over to Director Willett for the introduction, please.
Through your worship, to members of council, one of St. John's long-standing arts and culture institutions is the St. John Theatre Company, which has offered a space for artists and the public to enjoy the benefits of the theatre for over 30 years. I call it an institution as the theatre company helps sustain the vibrancy of the arts and culture community in St. John by educating and employing the creative class and also building, curating, and showcasing their great products. Today's presenter is Stephen Tobias, who's one of the founding members of the St. John Theatre Company. As executive director, he has overseen over 200 related productions. Currently, Stephen is also the artistic director of the new Atlantic Repertory Company. Before handing the floor over to Stephen, I'd like to remind council that Stephen's presentation is focused on the work of the St. John Theatre Company and their impact in our community, which is a great opportunity to ask Mr. Tobias questions on the content he shares. In turn, staff will be discussing its consolidated recommendation to the St. John Theatre Company's funding proposal during item 12.1 of today's council meeting, which will be the opportunity for council to debate and discuss that staff recommendation. So with that, I'll invite Mr. Tobias up.
Oh, you know how to work this better than...
Good evening, Mr. Tobias. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking some time this evening. I'd just like to take a moment to, your worship and members of council, acknowledge some guests we have here with us, board members, former board members, committee members, some consultants, and of course, what I have now learned is the busiest architect in St. John, Ms Wakefield, who among every other building in the city that she's working on, is of course the lead designer on our courthouse project. In thinking about what to do this evening, it occurred to me that August the 13th was the 14th anniversary of the opening of the BMO studio on Princess Street, which was our $2 million campaign to develop the old Lingley Printing Building into our new production facility. And you see how this is working for me? There we go, 14 years, it works, brilliant. So the importance of this facility on the development of the St. John Theatre Company can't really be overstated. If you can look at the transformation of the facility itself, I would argue that the transformation of that project wasn't just on the facility, but on the company and on our ability to deliver culture to the community. In 2008, when we moved into that building, the company had one part-time staff. It worked on 8 projects that year for an audience of 5,000 to 7,000 people and had revenues of $200,000. 14 years later, the company now has 13 permanent staff, plus summer staff, plus individual ARC artists hired under contracts. The company manages 40 to 45 projects a year for an audience of 20 to 25,000 people. And in the year ending June 2022, the gross revenues were $1.35 million. That is all growth created by having developed the platform of our Princess Street production facility in the BMO studio. Where am I? Some of this work that we did that year would have included the IATA International Theatre Festival, which we produced in partnership with Imperial Theatre. This hosted theatre works from 6 countries and hosted delegates from 25 different countries worldwide. I don't think there are many companies in the city that can boast projects that have that type of reach out around the world. Now, speaking of Imperial Theatre, it's one of our IATA projects, another IATA project from Germany.
Speaking of Imperial Theatre, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the ongoing and ever-growing synergy between the two organizations. The St. John Theatre Company is the largest and most prolific user of the Imperial Stage, occupying the facility 3 to 4 weeks out of every year, and has been doing so since the facility came online in 1994. St. John Theatre Company is the largest customer of Imperial Theatre. Imperial Theatre is the largest supplier of goods and services to the St. John Theatre Company. The two organizations are always looking for ways to grow closer. We currently share box office services and are looking at ways in the future to share marketing and technical resources and even collaborating on programming ideas to ensure we are making a strong combined impact on the overall audience without duplicating services to the community. Project of the Crucible, and of course, Driving Miss Daisy, which happened in March, which actually feels like a whole year ago now, the way this year is going. It's a great project. So, the growth that occurred with the Princess Street facility development, to us was very predictable based on a lot of things we saw happening around the community. The St. John Theatre Company growth has coincided with a huge cultural shift in Uptown St. John, growth that has been managed and promoted by heritage development conservationists, Envision St. John, Uptown St. John, Port St. John, and many others. Specific to the St. John Theatre Company, we knew this growth would be possible for two main reasons that we understood internally for many years. The first is that we don't often acknowledge that St. John is the largest concentration of Anglophone culture east of Montreal, third largest east of Montreal, behind Halifax and St. John's, Newfoundland. And the size of that market is great fuel for growth for an organization such as ours. And also, before the development of the Atlantic Repertory Company, St. John was the largest regional municipality in the country that did not have a professionalized theater production presence in their community. So we knew it would work long before we got there. However, in spite of all the planning with the BMO, we really didn't know when we opened it that it would be the home to the Fundy Fringe Festival. We didn't know that it would be the home to the Live at the BMO music series, which hosts artists from across the country, the Loyalist City Shakespeare, and of course the Atlantic Repertory Company. Beyond St. John Theatre Company related uses, the BMO studio has been host to a range of other events, including having guests from Theater Konstanz in Germany, which have been here twice to present and produce in our BMO studio. Theater New Brunswick tours there. Community Foundation of St. John has hosted their AGM there on multiple occasions. Regional Hospital Foundation events was a designated jazz event for the ECMAs when it was in St. John a few years ago. We're very proud that our Princess Street production facility has been the catalyst for this range of cultural growth in our community. As we move forward, I'd report that many years ago we identified a challenge in the growth trajectory of the St. John Theatre Company. It was clear to us back in 2016 that the St. John Theatre Company would soon outgrow itself. Based on the rate of programming growth, we were on track to outgrow the capacity of staff, volunteers, and facilities. We were faced with a choice of either deliberately stifling future growth or finding ways to expand our staffing, our talent base, and our venue capacity. This led initially to the development of the Atlantic Repertory Company, which is growing into a major regional hub for theatre professionals from throughout Eastern Canada. Since its launch in 2019, the Ark has provided over 200 opportunities for young professionals from all 4 Eastern provinces. The Ark has produced 10 theatre productions, including No Man is an Island, which celebrates the history of the Irish arrival in St. John through Partridge Island. Mary's Wedding, great Canadian play which toured New Brunswick and then went on to a tour of Germany and France, culminating in a final performance at the Canadian Embassy in Paris in the fall of 2019. We Were Here, by St. John poet and playwright Clyde A. Ray, which celebrated the history of the Black community in St. John, New Brunswick. The Ark has also created a new online training program called Ark Academy Online, which matches young artists from across Atlantic Canada with leading national and international teachers. As we look to the future, it's our plan that Ark will create permanent employment for artists in the community, making St. John a more active, creative, and cultural hub. We plan to leverage their talent to support cultural growth in the context of tourism and economic development. This would include a range of additional summertime activities combined with the creation of several new festival opportunities. The growth of trained professionals in our company will also support a range of education and community outreach activities, which are hardwired into all St. John Theatre Company work. As I come to the end of this report of St. John Theatre Company growth over the last 14 years, I'd like to acknowledge a few special projects that have happened this year and are going to happen throughout the next year. Now, everyone's aware of our Imperial Theatre series, which is the very public face and the most well-known of the series produced by St. John Theatre Company. However, through our BMO studio, we have had a range of interesting projects that include an Eid celebration, May 14th of this year, in partnership with the YMCA Newcomer Connections, celebrated the impact of Islamic heritage in our community. As was mentioned earlier, the Loyalist Burial Ground project, which is ongoing right now and to the end of the month, which explores the history of our community and is the kind of example of a work that the Ark can create, which can support tourism assets in the community. The Fundy Fringe Festival, which has also been mentioned, is on all of this week. This is the 10th anniversary of the Fundy Fringe, which has welcomed local artists from across Canada, the USA, and Europe, and has entertained thousands of St. John audience members over the last decade. The Whispers, which we'll be offering in November of this year. We're partnering with an artist, Mbene Mwambene, who is an artist from Malawi, who now works in Bern, Switzerland. He's created a work that explores the history of colonialism in Africa and examines his role as an artist, as an artist of color in the community. This will play at the BMO Studio Theatre, but will also tour to schools in the Greater St. John region. We will offer this at no charge to schools or students. And finally, coming up in February of next year, we're going to create a digital online International Theatre Festival in partnership with our colleagues of the IATA International Theatre Organization. 12 digital theatre works from all over the world will be presented through the St. John Theatre Company broadcast platform, along with a range of collateral programming, interviews, post-show discussions, debates on topics in the plays, etc. This is a precursor to what we hope will be a regular international live festival that we will want to host here in the community as we have the venues to do so. So you can see, I could go on and on because of the range and depth of the programming, but I'm conscious of the time. So I just want to thank the members of council for taking this opportunity to hear our update on what's happening. I also thank you for your time in considering our courthouse project, and I'd like to thank those of us who've come here with us this evening for sticking it out and being here. And I'll just open up for any questions or comments if anyone has any at this time.
Councillor Ogden, you're up.
Thank you, Stephen. As I spoke to you before, I believe we have the largest theatre district with all the high schools and Imperial Theatre in probably Atlantic Canada, and probably the nicest uptown in the country. And I think that with Harbour Station and with what you're doing in 506 is that there's a huge entertainment industry there for both tourism and for ourselves. And I encourage you all the more, and I encourage you all the more to work with children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sullivan?
Thanks, Your Worship, through you. Stephen, it's interesting. You were here when I was talking about Bill McMacken earlier. If I talked about theater, I could just slide your name in and do the same thing in St. John. Like, you're one of those folks in St. John. We're a better place because of your passion for the arts and where you have taken it. A couple of specific questions. I remember being on Princess Street when you opened the BMO Theatre. How long did that project take you to put together?
It was about 5 years from conception to opening, a couple of years to figure it out, a year or two to raise the money, and a year or two to get it built.
And so you've only picked up a building that's 5 times bigger.
We're figuring it'll be twice as long, because we're about 5.5, 6 years into this current project now.
And that was my second question, and really, thanks for the presentation. You've done a very good job along the way of keeping us up to date on where that project is and where the theater company is. Really just appreciate your patience and your continued communication and conversation throughout it. I guess I really don't have any other questions other than to say thanks, and I appreciate the fact that you understand that these things continue to take time, and we will continue to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harris?
It's blown me away. There was a lot in that presentation, Stephen, I didn't know. It's really interesting to see, you talk about the value that theater companies already brought. I mean, you guys really did kick off that renaissance on Princess Street, right? You've got some good neighbors there now. There's some new things happening.
You sure do.
But it's great to see. And I mean, I think for us, we're all excited. And I know in that last presentation that happened, Envision really came forward and talked about what kind of asset tourism this could be for a tourism asset. So it's amazing to see your trajectory, and I really hope that we can sustain that and keep that going.
Thank you. Councillor, Deputy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, Stephen, you and I go back quite a ways. We've had a lot of conversations on these projects, including the one on Princess Street. And I got to tell you, I really appreciate your passion and your dedication and the way that you attract people to a cause and get things done. I mean, it's people like you that are making the city the way it is today, thriving. So I really want to thank you for that. And this is the type of thing that draws more people to our city, having these opportunities that other places just don't get because they don't have people like you. So I just want to thank you for coming in tonight, and I think you've done an awful lot. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Redwan?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Tobias, thank you for the presentation. And I always feel like I can't keep up, right? I wish I had more time to go and see more and more of the fabulous work that you do. I'm just wondering, because I see in your presentation you had said that you have an audience of, it's grown up to 25,000. And I know that you're projecting that the new project will bring about 100,000 people in. Just wondering if you have plans in place to be able to bring those people into St. John.
We do, but I'll restate that number because I think it has been interpreted as meaning 100,000 visitors to the community, where we're talking about 100,000 visitors to the venue, which would include artists who are rehearsing, training, etc. So if you look at, unlike, let's say, Imperial Theater, which would have a group of artists come in the morning or the day before, and they do their performance and they leave to go on to the next theater. As a producing theater, which is a different model, we would have a large group of artists that would come together for 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time, and then would move on to a range of public performances, which might stretch for a week or two. So that generates a huge range of individual visits to the facility. So when we're looking at these numbers, it isn't specifically, this is how many people are going to hop in their car and drive to St. John. Although we do hope that there will be a fair amount of those as well, particularly with the summertime work we're looking at into the future and a various range of festival plans that we're working on for the future.
No, that's great insight. And I know when I sat on the board for Discover St. John, it was always like, how could you increase the room numbers, the amount of room nights that the hotels would generate, because that's when people really get spending in the community. No, that's great. Thank you.
And just if I can just follow up, I think the flip side of that is, and we're seeing this with other events happening in the community, is that what it's also doing is it's having people stay here instead of hopping in their car and going somewhere else for an event, because we have the events that are happening here now. So it's a double benefit in that context.
Just like we're seeing with 506, people will stay here. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I'll thank you myself as well. It's the St. John Theatre Company really adds a huge value proposition to the city of St. John. I think my favorite space actually is the BMO Theater. I personally like that more intimate space. And Ed and I've been to Fringe several times in St. John, but we've gone one year we happened to be in Halifax. It's not as fun because you can't run from one performance to the next. You have to get in your car and drive there. So that's the beauty of St. John, is you really can take in almost all of them. So it's really great to have you in town. And the other thing is that, we all learn by many different methods, and listening to someone's story is an important way to learn as well. And I like that component, especially with you exploring diversity, et cetera, and so that's great for us too. It's nice to hear those stories. And it's just a very, I guess, enjoyable way to learn about a lot of things that you wouldn't know about otherwise. So appreciate that aspect as well. So thanks for coming in tonight. Always great to hear from you. And you were 10 minutes and 25 seconds, bang on. I love
Good
that
stuff.
in a presenter.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. And you've said some nice things about me, but I do want to acknowledge that I can't do what I do without our board, our staff, a great group of volunteers, and a great group of artists that we work with. Wouldn't be able to get much done without them. So when you thank me, I'll thank them.
You
And
do have a
thank
great
you.
team.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks to all of you for coming in. It's nice to see everyone, exactly. Yeah. I need a motion to receive and file. Councillor Norton and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item, City Clerk. Where are we off to next?
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda, under consideration of bylaws, item 10.1. It's a proposed amendment to the Heritage Conservation Area bylaw for 111 to 119 King Street East.
I'm passing this over to Commissioner Hamilton for an introduction.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you for third reading is an application that was submitted by J.D. Irving Limited, which seeks to amend the city's Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw to remove properties located at 111 to 119 King Street East. The application does seek permission to remove 3 properties from the King Street East Heritage Conservation Area for the purposes of demolishing an existing building on the properties to allow the site to be developed as a neighborhood play park. On July 11th, following the required public hearing, council approved first and second reading of the bylaw amendment, and council further approved a referral to the city manager to address concerns raised by members of council related to the design of the park, to improve on the heritage integration of the design, and to provide greater clarity on provisions in the contractual agreement related to the 20-year maintenance period for the park. Since first and second reading, there's been considerable engagement with J.D. Irving Limited and further due diligence and work done on the design of the park. And staff are recommending further amendments to the contract between the city and JDI to address these facets. And I can confirm for council that all legislative requirements have been addressed as required under the Heritage Conservation Areas Act. And the resolution in the report provides the required motions of council to move forward with the third reading and approval of the amended contractual agreement. And with that as an introduction, I will turn things over to Phil Ouellette, Director of Growth and Community Planning, to provide an overview of the recommendations before you this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton, and through your worship to members of council. I'm happy to be here with you this evening to help guide council through this important decision. As mentioned during council's last interaction on this proposal, we received important input from members of council and the community on J.D. Irving Limited's proposal and the staff recommendation. And as a result, from the feedback from this last interaction, it was evident that adjustments were needed prior to returning to third reading. And as mentioned from Commissioner Hamilton, the 2 big areas that the report in your package indicates that staff were very keen on responding to were around design as well as the draft agreement. So as it relates to design, the applicant hired a third-party design firm since the July 11th meeting to integrate heritage and historical facets more meaningfully into the design of the proposed playground and historical park. The updated design from the applicant now includes a few things I'd like to review with council today. First, it's got a scaled down replica of this church steeple, if you can see it in the corner of the lot here. The other facet of the updated design includes two elements of the existing building into the design. One of them, you can see it in the corner of this lot on the other side. Yes, you can see my little here. This would be the wartime timber that was used for the building now that is dependent on it being salvageable, but the objective would be to utilize it there, as well as in the front of the building to use the stairwell and the handrails from the existing building at 111 King Street East. In addition, the storyboards, there's more input on the storyboards. I think the last interaction, it was 3 to 5 storyboards. Now there's be a minimum of 10 storyboards, and they've clarified, the applicant has clarified what those elements would be, including the first YWCA, as well as recognition of the builder of the building existingly standing at 111 King Street East, Jacob Pikowski. There's also an intentionality of integrating books into the design, as the site once held a library. This would include the introduction of a mini free library. I think some of you will be aware of this concept of a kind of take a book type of approach. So that's the logic through that. The other piece that's maybe the most evident from the last design is that there's much more integration of the color red, and that is intentional to commemorate Apple Day, which was first started here in St. John through the St. John Boy Scouts. So apples in red would be integrated into this new upgraded design. There's also a little bit more specificity on the brick pavers and the granite edging in the landscape, as well as the wood fiber design of the playground pad. Lastly, and you'll see it here, there's a second small play structure just for smaller kids. I believe they're looking into integrating some sort of Apple feature into that as well. So with that, it is staff's position that the updated renderings depict a more thorough integration of heritage and historical elements into the playground and historical park design and features, which are valuable enhancements from the renderings first shared with the Heritage Development Board back in June 2022. So in terms of the draft contract, which was the second piece that staff really wanted to focus in on since first and second, a handful of changes have occurred since council was exposed to the previous version. So first, there is new language to clarify that that prior to construction, the applicant will be sharing the drawings and the renderings for staff review and comment. That was not in the past draft recommendation, or the draft contract, I apologize. The next one is that the actual schedule, so there's a schedule of these updated renderings, they're actually tied directly to the contract. So it says right in the contract, see rendering, see the nature of that rendering, and that's now a part of that agreement. The biggest changes was what was previously Section 3, which was around diminishing or reducing the 20-year maintenance period. There's a lot of question and debate about that at the July 11th meeting, and there are some changes that I'd like to report this evening. So one of them is that the applicant will exercise the outlined steps and criteria. So, you'll notice that this section of the draft agreement is reorganized, pointing to steps and criteria that are expected to the owner of the property in order to proceed with the determination of a reduced maintenance period. Before, it was much more broad. This outlines steps and criteria that are required. The next one is around security. It was unclear the level of security that would be provided towards this playground. So the applicant's commitment to ensure security at the playground, including periodic monitoring, should offer added comfort to council and the community on securing this 20-year maintenance period. Additional clarity also was provided around the needed instances of vandalism. There was a discussion there of at the July 11th meeting around, well, how many does it take? So the language, we're not prescriptive here, it's just repeated instances. And this should provide some comfort that this is not first act of an obstacle related to this park that the owner would be running away from it. There's also two others that I'd like to speak to, and then I'll kind of provide some feedback on them. One is the requirement to submit a written notice to the City of St. John in an event the applicant determined the need to reduce the maintenance period. And then secondly, that the city would be granted a reasonable opportunity to provide input or assistance on possible remediation. While the changes uphold the applicant's ultimate authority to make the determination to reduce the maintenance period as the private landowner of 111-119 King Street East, it also clarifies the city's commitment to respond and support needed mitigation efforts to resolve future challenges that the park may face. In other words, in a scenario that the public benefit of the playground and historic park was in jeopardy, the city would mobilize a multidisciplinary group of professional staff to partner with the applicant to respond and deliver a resolution to what those challenges might be. So from staff's perspective, the updated contract has much clearer language on the criteria, steps, and expectations associated with the unfortunate scenario where there is a reduction in the maintenance period. Council should also take comfort in the strength and the value of the heritage approval process undertaking in this proposal. The approval process is in place to ensure diversity of perspective, discussions and debates, and ultimately to equip Common Council with adequate information to render a strategic decision. The process included 3 staff reports, a committee review and recommendation, a public hearing, a council vote on first and second reading, and various updates originating from the application. In conclusion, the new adjustment to the applicant's proposal further supports the previous staff recommendation of removing 111-119 King Street East from the St. John Heritage Conservation Area Bylaw. With these changes, staff recommend that Council move forward with third reading of the proposed amendment to the City's Heritage Conservation Area Bylaw and grant approval to enter into a contractual agreement as amended with J.D. Irving Limited to secure the proposed public park. Before I open it up for discussion, I did want to highlight a correction in the service and financial outcomes section of the report. The report indicates that the property assessment for 111-119 King Street East was $259,100, but after reviewing the 2022 assessment, the assessment has been reduced to approximately $126,000. Staff connected with Service New Brunswick to understand the rationale for this adjustment and assessment, but we have not yet received a response from Service New Brunswick on it. But I just wanted to clarify that that needs to be adjusted. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
There we go. Thank you, Director Willett. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Okay, I have a couple of questions here. Councillor Killen?
I actually don't have a question, but I would like to make a motion to table third reading for 3 months while staff explore policy options. And if I can get a seconder, I can extrapolate on that. Okay. So this one has been really tough, obviously. It's been a very hotly debated issue, and I really think that we need to take a beat here. And in fairness, the applicant put a timeline on it, but how do we look at facilitating the sale, the repair, or a vacant building tax to ensure the city can recoup costs on this, as it does need to be monitored? We've been speaking at great length about these issues at Growth Committee, and we have our Affordable Housing Action Plan that's sitting there ready to be sort of rectified here. I feel this can be rectified if we can pause and look at enforcement options that could alter this potential outcome. Given that the bylaw consideration should not unduly affect the applicant, I ask for a 3-month timeline on recommendations as part of this motion. We are in a housing crisis. I understand that JDI does not want to be involved in housing. However, there is evidence that they do have other rental properties, and I worry about why that is. It is a slippery slope. The property is inconvenient to them, and unfortunately, given this housing crisis, we all may need to make some sacrifices, especially considering their extensive resources, not only to capital, but to the building materials themselves. That being said, it is on the City of St. John to change this policy in the meantime and to not allow this building to fall. We need to act less like capitalists who allow businesses to thrive over human beings and move into a healthier, more sustainable, less profit-driven future. We are a government, not a corporation. Community benefit of housing far outweighs the needs for more parks. The applicant has a means to either do better or sell to someone who will. I would love to see a suite of policy options we can develop to save this property.
Okay. So I have a mover and I have a seconder on a tabling motion. City Clerk? What is, is there questions on a tabling motion, or do we just go right to the vote?
You would go to the vote unless it's related to the propriety of
Okay, perfect.
tabling the motion.
So we're going to vote on the tabling motion, to table the... Okay, Deputy? So you're going to
So
speak on
I
the
guess
propriety?
my question is, the information that I believe that you wanted to table this because new information? At first, second reading, we asked for more information, which was brought forward now, okay? And, I mean, I've never seen this happen before. I think that, I mean, I'm not going to support tabling this, but I think that you have to determine, is that a legitimate reason to table something in third reading? I guess is a question.
I would assume we just vote on it, do we?
Your worship, again, with a tabling motion, you are not in a position whereby you can discuss
Right.
the merits of any of Councillor Killen's views on this issue, but you can discuss through questions from council on the propriety of the motion. Is it appropriate to table? That question can be discussed. What cannot be discussed is the essence of the reasons why Councillor Killen wishes it tabled.
Okay, we'll just
So-
go to the vote. You know.
Okay, so there are some lights on. Does
So you have to go
Councillor
through them.
Hickey, who wants to speak? Councillor Hickey, did you want to speak on the propriety of the, okay, go ahead.
Specific to the propriety of this motion, I think if this process has done anything, it's highlighted some policy gaps that I think many folks around this table have identified in our heritage protocol. I guess to staff, my only question is, when Councillor Killen lists potential of vacant home tax, repair options, ability to comply with the heritage requirement to put the building up for sale, is there more out there? I understand that we're expecting more, but like, is it actual, like?
But aren't you supposed, you're going to say on whether or not we
Well, that's
should
what
be?
I would think that would be to the propriety of tabling it, because I'm wondering if there's actual merit behind the table as to whether or not any of those are going to
Come to
present
fruition?
anything new for us.
Okay, so, okay. Is there an answer for that?
I just offer those comments with the caveat of saying, I think we've identified clear issues in this, with our heritage constraints that have put us in this position.
But, okay.
Your worship, through you, back to the councillor. What the city staff has committed to and is within the work plan is to review our community standards program broadly, which would include issues related to vacant and dilapidated buildings, et cetera. The commitment is to a review. There is no assurance whatsoever that within the next 3 months, there would be concrete recommendations with it that would address this particular circumstance. The reality is, we just don't know. The Affordable Housing Action Plan also has initiatives within it, action items within it. But again, there is no, I just wish to be clear in terms of the timeline of 3 months, there is no certainty that we would be coming back to council within that time frame unless council were to direct us to significantly and drastically change the work effort of staff in order to try to get this done within that time frame. We still have many items on the 2022 work plan that have not yet been fully addressed. Thank you.
Okay, so I do see Councillor Norton on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the sponsor of the motion. So, Councillor, just to be sure that the reason for the tabling motion is to get answers to questions that you've listed that from staff reports have not been answered to date. Am I correct?
For instance, the outstanding issue of the program around vacant and derelict buildings that is sitting there on the work plan, I believe, to be addressed, and that's around and been talked about. So
Is
to me,
it-
that feels
Is it, I don't want to
imminent.
I don't want to cut you off because I know
Nope.
you have a list. I'm just wondering if we can just, through your worship to the city manager, the counselor lists program gaps or program requirements as it relates to this property that could impact council's decision. As it relates to a review of those, we are how many months away, you believe?
Your worship, through you to the counselor, we have committed to come back with recommendations on the vacant and derelict building program by the end of this calendar year.
Right.
What we have not said is that there will be significant and dramatic change that would affect this building. Moreover, the reason the staff is supportive of this being considered by council at this point in time is because of the nature of the specific request. And the nature of the specific request is to be removed from the heritage conservation area for other purposes. Whatever the situation is in terms of this building, in terms of its vacant or dilapidated condition, is not specific to the request at hand that's being considered.
Is there, Counselor, are there other things other than those programming gaps that the city manager has spoke to that that this motion aims to get better clarity or better better disclosure on?
Is how the RSC, the Regional Service Commissions and Committees, are going to be formed. So there's going to be some downloading up to this new entity right around these issues, and I feel like that's also outstanding.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Radwan?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention that I don't really understand how staff know whether or not this would have an effect on this property when everything is not figured out yet. And I thought that it was stated that the unsightly premises program evaluation that the staff are doing was supposed to come back in October. That's what I thought I heard at Growth Committee. So if it's not due to come back until the end of the year, I would propose extending this motion out until the end of the year. That's what I would recommend to Councillor Killen, is actually adjusting that timeline, because that's the whole point of this motion, I think, on the for tabling it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Killen? You're agreeable with that, I guess?
I'm option with that, absolutely. I think that the more time the better. I don't think that this is going to be, I mean, I don't know that 100%, but I'm guessing there's not going to be a huge amount of work done in this winter period. So I just think there is time.
So it's now, what is it? How many months is it? December? Okay. Just for your information. Councillor Norton?
I, through you to either the commissioner or the city manager, or perhaps it's legal counsel. I'm trying to go back in my decade of public hearings as it relates to a tabling motion during third reading. Procedurally, I suppose you can table anything, but is there anything that I'm missing as it relates to the I guess the process with tabling a third reading and having staff take a deeper dive, as the counselor has suggested? I don't recall being in a similar circumstance. I could have, but nothing that has garnered the limelight that this property has.
Through you, Your Worship, to the counselor, there is nothing specific that prevents the tabling of this third reading or this consideration of the third reading. However, in context, when the staff continues to work on this file, which has been worked on exhaustively up to this point in time, we will still remain focused on the application at hand. For clarity, I did not say that there would or would not be major changes to the vacant and dilapidated building program. I'm saying I do not know what those changes will be. And although the first discussions will in fact be at growth in October through the iterative process, I do not believe that there will be approved changes to the vacant and dilapidated program before the end of the year at the earliest. And then we have to take a look at time and space and costing and everything else that would apply to it as well. So there's a tremendous amount of unknowns for something that may or may not have effect on this project. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, City Manager. To the councillor, because I've got about 60 seconds here and she's good with the gamble tonight. I'm looking at the questions that the tabling motion aims to have answered through a deeper dive by staff. I think I understand the areas in general, what they are. Are there things being done in other communities that I'm unaware of within a New Brunswick Local Governance Act circumstance that we're not currently taking advantage of that surround these questions? If so, I would like to know, but I from my understanding, I don't believe that there are. I guess I throw that out there to anybody. City Manager, thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, to the council, I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, we are taking a look at what other communities do and do not do. That will form part of our recommendations. We do have a vacant and dilapidated or derelict program that has produced outstanding results. So I'm not sure we're far off the mark. There are unique issues that we have, of course, because of our richness of heritage buildings that we have within the city. But other than that, I can't really give you an answer today. There's no big thing that we have identified that we are missing.
Excellent. Thank you. No, thank you for receiving that question.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan?
Your Worship, certainly I appreciate the conversation around the table because it's given me some time to think. From a process point of view, I certainly respect that council is not unanimous on this and the community is not unanimous on this, so I understand that. But with regards to the motion, to hold this one particular project, because we're doing a review, it kind of presupposes that we might actually choose to make changes at that time. And if we step back and say, well, no, it's about the derelict and vacant program itself, do we table the fact that we've got another item on the agenda to tear a building down that's related to these programs? So I think we can't presuppose for what we may or may not change in our own bylaws down the road, or we would be waiting on everything until it might change down the road. So I think we need to deal with what we have now and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey? This is must be your second time. Yeah, for sure.
It is, Your Worship.
Okay.
I figured you'd keep me in line on that.
I'm trying.
I guess perhaps through you to Jacqueline or someone on staff, I guess what I'm left with this one is I'm getting questions from the public, getting questions from folks in the community, and they're extremely well researched and have depth and understanding on our processes. And I'm left with questions I feel like I can't answer effectively because, people are coming back to, well, we can force repair, or we can go down the route of fining, or we can go down the route of forced compliance with sale. Can you comment on those briefly, perhaps, just to offer some more clarity around this and more clarity around why we've ended here?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Hickey, I guess I would start my comments by saying really the decision before Council tonight is one that's focused on your Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw. So that's really the framework in which you're making your decision tonight. We did advise as part of the public hearing process that the property had been monitored as part of the vacant and dangerous buildings program. It's not something that's currently prioritized in that program because it doesn't meet the safety requirements. The councillor is speaking to the different paths that can be taken with respect to buildings that are deemed hazardous to the safety of the public, and there are mechanisms either through the provincial courts and levying of fines or the very successful effort we've taken through the Dangerous Buildings program where we issue an order, and really the remedy there is demolition if we're not able to have the property owner remedy the unsafe conditions. The reason why we don't go the route of fines is simply because they're not significant in scope, and really the success we've had is around the lever that we have with demolition and really using our programs in a focused way coupled with incentives to address the success we've had with the aggressive actions on our dangerous buildings program. But I would certainly, I know this is a challenging decision for council, and there are a number of initiatives underway to address strengthened outcomes around the dangerous and vacant buildings program, but really that's not the decision that's before you today. It is really focused on the Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw, and there is an obligation on the part of council to make a decision on these files in a timely manner. It is an application that's before you, and certainly you do have to consider all of the input that you've received from the public and from staff and the Heritage Board, but there's an obligation to make a decision on a file. The program improvements that are being considered are wide-ranging in scope, and we will be looking at issues like legislative authority. There are things that are being done in other jurisdictions that we simply don't have the authority to address here. So I put that out there for your consideration. It is a procedural issue for you, and we will continue on our path of improving these programs and welcome input from members of the community around improvements to those programs going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was good information. General Counsel?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I can just offer a little bit of information at the risk of, I'm going to be careful not to move into the provision of legal advice in an open session of council, because we don't do that. We provide you advice in closed session. But to the point that the Commissioner made about making a decision in a timely manner on a public hearing, there are reasons for that. And in fact, on land use matters in this jurisdiction, you have 6 months to make a decision on a land use matter on third reading. So you cannot go beyond 6 months between your second and your third reading. That same provision is not found in the Heritage Conservation Act. That's not to say that the principles that gave rise to that provision being in the Community Planning Act do not apply. So I just, I caution council on the timeliness and the need to make that decision and to not be influenced by items outside of what you've heard at the public hearing as you make your decision. And I reiterate what Commissioner Hamilton has said, is that you are being called upon to make a decision not on derelict building or vacant building. You're being asked to make a decision on whether or not a property should be kept inside of a heritage area or not. That's the extent of the decision you're being asked to make. I think it's important. I wanted to make sure you were reminded of that. And whatever staff brings back is not going to change the fact that you're being asked to make a decision and amend a bylaw that has the impact of keeping something inside that area or not. That's the extent of the decision. So if you choose to table, procedurally, obviously you can table. If it would be helpful, if council is struggling, because I recognize that council is struggling with the decision, if it would be helpful for council to get advice on the matter, you can table for that purpose, but that advice will not be provided in open session.
Okay, so to my count, hang on. We've got the deputy. Okay, deputy.
Thank you, Bishop. So I guess I'm back to my original point. Okay, if we're here to make a decision on whether or not this property should be taken out of the heritage zone, right? It's got nothing to do with what city staff is working on in 6 months or a year's time with regards to dilapidated buildings. So it's inappropriate to use that reason to stall this project, in my humble opinion. I mean, if we're talking about affordable housing and there's no way on God's green earth that's going to be used for affordable housing, then how can you delay making a decision that you're obligated to make using an excuse that doesn't exist in the circumstance? I mean, that's just the way I'm looking at it. So to me, I agree with Councillor Sullivan. This has been on the table for a long time. We need to deal with it. We deal with a lot of tough decisions. It's not, I mean, that's what you're in this for. And I think we need to get on with this. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Councillor Killen, I think this is your third round. So I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway here to wrap up your.
So I do believe this is related to heritage, 100%. We lost jelly bean houses. We lost a number of buildings as a result of whatever has gone on. And some of yes, I understand that we're only supposed to hear what we have heard this evening, but I do not think this park is supporting our heritage zone. So I do think that we need to look at the reasons we got here. So I would love to table and ask for a professional advice from our general counsel on how this happened and what needs to be done to get to this next, so this doesn't happen ever again.
Okay, so I guess I will say to the team, since I have no one else there, is that you have to decide what you're going to do now with this building. You've got 111 King Street East. It's on your agenda for this evening. You have. There's a motion on the floor. Well, that's what I'm asking you. We have a motion on the floor, so you're either going to table it or you're not going to table it. So that's your question tonight, right now. So I'm going to call the vote. So I'll call the question. All in favor of the tabling motion, please raise your hand. 2. Against? Okay. Motion defeated. So
now you carry on with the questions about the presentation and the recommendations.
so now I'm going back to staff questions, right? And the presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'm going back to questions.
Staff recommendation,
Okay, well, he can do that.
and I think I can.
Okay, so I'll take a seconder on that, Councillor Sullivan. So now I'm going to say, does anyone have any questions? Councillor Sullivan?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, and it's a question I asked at first and second reading. We had a different team around the table, and I thought I got a very clear answer. But as been alluded to, there's been a lot of community conversation since. And I asked the question, in my mind, my understanding was that we are very limited at the current time in what we can do and enforce on this property. My understanding is it's binary. So my question through you to staff is, I understand we can delist from the heritage zone and then allow it to move forward to be demolished in a park, or we can not delist, and if it continues to remain dilapidated, we could have to enforce that it remains safe, and that's the amount of repair that we could enforce. Is that, or are those our current options?
Okay. General Counsel?
I think at a very high level, Councillor, I would not disagree with anything you've said. I think that, yes, tonight you're being asked it stays in or it stays out. If you pass it, it comes out. If you don't pass it, the application fails, which means it stays in. And then staff will explore whatever they will explore, and maybe Commissioner Hamilton is best positioned to speak to what would happen at that point.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes, Your Worship, I understand that from Director Poffenroff, who advised council as part of the public hearing process, that the options that exist should the removal be rejected by council tonight is that the Property would continue to be monitored through the Dangerous Buildings Program. It is not currently a high priority in that program. It's about midway down the list, and we would continue to monitor that and take action as appropriate. And there exists mechanisms for the city to pursue further enforcement action should it be deemed a hazard to the safety of the public.
Thank you. Councillor Radwan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a bit of a comment. Of course, now we're looking at whether or not we allow this to be designated, and I just wanted to place a couple of comments for thought. So, this previous council had decided which properties would be designated and which ones not designated. And the one thing in the public hearing that really resonated with me was that JDI bought into the fact that this property was going to be designated. And so I really strongly believe that if there's a vote to allow this to be de-designated, then it's a vote for demolition by neglect. And there's a certain precedence that's being set for that. And I do feel the need just to kind of remind council of that before we go ahead and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you, I guess it's not really a question, more of a comment. I guess with the indication from General Counsel that we couldn't discuss the implications of this move, but I'm left confused because I think it was pretty clear about what the implications from our removal of heritage would then follow. So I don't understand why it precludes us from talking about the demolition of the building when I think that's at the core of it, beyond removing it from heritage. I mean, I think there was a certain implication there that said, I mean, it's clear, that's the plan. So I don't understand why that's separated from this. While I understand the public hearing was to address the heritage concept of it, the demolition permit isn't coming here. So that doesn't give us an opportunity to address that when the scope of the plan is such that meets all of those. Right? The scope of the plan is dependent on a demolition permit that no one around this table will have impact on. But I think that's a consideration that has to be given when we're discussing or when we're being limited to only being able to talk about the heritage qualification.
Maybe the commissioner or maybe GC can speak to that, or maybe you can, but.
Like, I mean, it's not something we followed. I think we've pretty clearly talked about the demolition and the impacts as such, and I think was certainly present in the public hearing. And I think it was present in comments around the horseshoe. I'm just left confused as to why it was limited, but the scope of the project is such that it includes the demolition of it.
Your Worship, if I could offer to Council for consideration, what was made clear during the public hearing and the presentations associated with it is that this building is not unsafe at this point in time. Everyone predicts or assumes that it will be unsafe at some point in the future. That's an assumption at this point in time. There's no guarantee of that. Therefore, the vacant and dangerous building, it may never make it high enough up the vacant and dangerous building program to merit any sort of action from the city. It could, we're talking about assumptions. Another plausible scenario is that it could remain just as an ugly looking building for a very long period of time before it is addressed. That's why, to a degree, our view is, and our recommendation is to remain focused on the question of whether you wish to de-designate or not. The discussions on the future possibility that it would be declared unsafe and therefore we would take actions is conjecture at this point in time. If you wish to consider that conjecture, then in your own decision making, then by all means, you're free to do so, but it is conjecture. Thank you.
And I guess without being precluded from that, I appreciate that. It does frustrate me that folks who did come to speak in the public hearing were limited in being able to talk to that because we're kind of pigeonholed into that one spot. I guess if I could offer more comments, Your Worship, I think it's been clear my frustration around this. I think we're left in a situation where without those impacts that and without those reconsiderations that staff is making now around both our vacant and dilapidated program as well as our heritage programs, we're left in a position that doesn't give us much room. And I think it's been clear from the conversation that's been had in the community. I think it's been clear. I think it's been clear within this whole process. And I think it's illustrated a very clear gap in our bylaws and the mechanisms in which we're protecting heritage in our community and the amount of trust that we're putting in our developers and our property owners and folks that are caretaking heritage in the city. I think it puts a lot of trust in them to make sure that the onus is on them to protect our heritage, when I think a lot of that onus needs to be put on us to make sure that we're protecting housing stock in the city and that we're protecting what happens there. And I think without it, we're left in this situation where that we are in now. And I think any narrative that this council and that the city of St. John isn't ready to move forward and isn't ready to grow is false. And I think just look at what we did tonight. In 2 different projects, we approved over 150 new units for the city. That adds a lot, right? We're moving along well and our growth is on track, but being open for business doesn't mean you can do what you want at all costs to our communities. Because at the end of the day, this council is responsible to build good neighborhoods. It's responsible to foster growth. It's responsible to look after our taxpayers' investments in this community. And I think that matters above further interest. With that said, I think given the situation that we're in, I think given the position that our neighborhood's in, I am going to support staff's recommendation here and move on with this project. I think it's one that we need to see moved along. I think it's one that we've seen considerable concessions given by the developer. I think it's one that, we've also made clear, excuse me, as a council.
Councillor, I got you over your time, way over.
All right.
Thank you. I guess at the end of the day, we negotiate in good faith with everybody that comes. I mean, tonight you had the Charlotte Street project. People asked about, it's rezoning. People asked about how big the units were, how small the units were, whether it was going to have this, whether they were accessible. That's got nothing to do with the rezoning of it, but we ask all those questions, all interesting. We got to find out where it's going, but we're just going to rezone it. So, I mean, every question, every project that comes here to us with an ask, whatever the application is, has all sorts of domino effects with it. And I guess all we can do is our best at the end of the day. And so, I mean, I guess so now we've got a mover and a seconder on this. You're going to have to decide what you want to do with it. So there's Councillor Norton is up.
I see that the vote is on the table, so I do feel like I do need to explain where I am on this side.
Okay.
And I will continue to vote no as it relates to staff's recommendation on this one. For me, it's simply it's a decision of practicality versus principle, and that's what it's coming down to. Both sides have their merits. One side sees the practicality of it, and the other side sees a principled position on it. And we can debate those, and I foresee that there'll be other applications that will come under a similar lens. But for me, I will choose the principled approach as it relates to this and continue to vote no as it relates to the application. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Question. So on the question, all in favor? Oh, wait now. I'm not there yet. You haven't read the motions. We haven't read the motions.
So thank you, Your Worship. Now, the motion on the floor is the correct one. It's to adopt staff's recommendation. Once that's been dealt with, there would be 2 more motions, one for third reading in entirety and third reading by title.
Okay, so Councillor Lowe has the right motion on there. So to adopt staff recommendation. On the question, all in favor? 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? And 3. Motion carried. Next motion.
So next motion, Your Worship, would be third reading in its entirety of the bylaw.
Need a motion for third reading in its entirety. Councillor Sullivan and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed?
This bylaw is entitled Bylaw HC1, a law to amend the Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw. The Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw, enacted on the 23rd day of September 2019, is amended by one amending paragraph 21F by adding immediately preceding as illustrated on Schedule F, which forms part of this bylaw, is hereby established as King Street East Heritage Conservation Area, and excluding properties at civic address 111-119 King Street East. Number 2, amending Schedule F King Street East Heritage Conservation Area by removing from Heritage Conservation Area a parcel of land having an area of approximately 1,483 square meters, including buildings and structures thereon, located at 111-119 King Street East, also identified as PID number 000-16337, 000-16345, and 000-16352, and by adding to the written description immediately following properties facing King Street East and immediately preceding bounded on the south, and excluding the properties at civic addresses 111-119 King Street East.
Okay, I need a motion to approve third reading by title. Deputy and Councillor Sullivan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Bylaw number HC-1, a law to amend the St. John Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw.
Thank you, City Clerk. And on to the next item, please.
So next on the agenda, Your Worship, under considerations of bylaws, is item 10.2, proposed municipal plan amendment at 1556 Manawagnish Road, and submitted as a 30-day letter.
I'm going to hand this one over to Commissioner Hamilton.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council, before you this evening is an application for municipal plan amendment for a property located at 1556 Manawagnish Road. The application, which was submitted by Cedar Hill Cemetery, seeks to redesignate the property from stable residential to parks and natural area to permit the expansion of the existing cemetery. Council had held the required public presentation on July 11th, and the 30-day public review period has expired, during which the public had an opportunity to provide written submissions to council. Included in your package is one letter of opposition received on the application, and the application is now before you for a decision to move forward in the process to refer it to the Planning Advisory Committee and schedule the required public hearing for October 3rd. Council can also opt not to move forward with the process and deny the application at this stage. It is staff's recommendation that council proceed to the next stage in the process, which will provide opportunities for full consideration of the application, including technical review by staff, review by the Planning Advisory Committee, and further opportunities for public input at both Planning Advisory Committee and council. With that, I will turn it back over to Your Worship for the required motion.
Thank you. So I'll take a motion to refer to PAC, please. The deputy and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Next item, Your Worship, is 12.1 on your agenda. It's Consolidated Recommendation St. John Theatre Company.
I'm sending this one all over to you as well. It's the Jacqueline Hamilton Show tonight. Over to you.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council. As you will recall, earlier this spring, St. John Theatre Company submitted a request to council to be a funding partner in its plans to revitalize the Sydney Street Courthouse and build a state-of-the-art new performance venue, which you heard about this evening. This request was referred to both Growth Committee and Finance Committee, and significant due diligence was completed by staff, both committees, and St. John Theatre Company to produce a consolidated recommendation for council's consideration this evening. Phil Ouellette, Director of Growth and Community Planning, has led this effort on behalf of staff, and I'm pleased to turn it over to him to provide an overview of the recommendations before you this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton, and through your worship to members of council. I'm again happy to be before council this evening for this report. The City of St. John is very fortunate to have the arts and culture community it has, which plays such an important role in defining the city's unique value proposition, the city's growth, and a sense of belonging. The St. John Theatre Company is part of this important fabric and has assembled a proposal to expand on the city's ability to sustain and grow this arts and culture vibrancy. For simplicity, I think the easiest way to go through the consolidated staff recommendation is to literally go through the staff recommendation. I'm not going to go through this word for word. I'll give you some color commentary, if you may, on what this does. So the first item, point 1, seeks to immediately commit $418,000 from the Discover St. John Reserve Fund into a restricted operating reserve fund. The criteria to access the Discover Fund received approval from Council in July, which aligns with the analysis completed with Growth Committee. The Restricted Operating Reserve Fund limits the ability to use these funds for any other reason outside of supporting the Courthouse Expansion Project. Point two of the recommendation, a little bit more complicated, but I'll walk you through it. To respond to the feedback shared by the Finance Committee, this consolidated recommendation proposes that the additional $400,000 towards the project is accessed through the General Operating Reserve Fund, conditional on the fund achieving at least 75% of the maximum allowable fund held in the operating reserve. You're probably asking yourself what that means. The maximum allowable operating reserve room is dictated by provincial legislation and equates to 5% of a municipal government's previous year's operating budget. So, for example, the 75% threshold in 2023 will be just over $6.1 million. These two past recommendations point to the difference between funding commitments and funding distributions, which is important to clarify. The city will commit funds into a restricted operating reserve fund, and once all conditions are met by the St. John Theatre Company, the city has the process of distributing the funds. Staff outlined possible distribution timeline in the report, which is dependent on a variety of conditions, but could very well occur in the sequence. So I'll go through very quickly. By September 2022, this report indicates that we'd commit $418,000. By January 2023, the city would commit $400,000 to the fund, completing its $818,000 commitment. As soon as all the conditions are met by the St. John Theatre Company, the city would distribute $418,000 to the St. John Theatre Company immediately. As soon as November 2023, and upon the completion of all conditions, the city could contribute the first of 4 installments of $100,000 to the St. John Theatre Company. In other words, by the end of 2023, St. John Theatre Company could receive $518,000 from the city for this important project. By November 2024, another $100,000, 2025, same in 2026. The next recommendation is the longest one. And this is outlining all the conditions that would apply to this. Now, I'm not going to go through this at length because what we're essentially defining is what would be in the funding agreement eventually. So we're giving council an idea of the prominent facets of the funding agreement, which is a part of the recommendation this evening. So I'll go through maybe the key facets of those, because these will certainly be part of the recommendation or the funding agreement, which will come back to council, but there will be others as well. So we've already talked about the restricted reserve fund. I'm not going to cover that. The release of the funds are conditional upon a variety of important factors. One is the launch of the public fundraising campaign. The other is a signed agreement, a funding agreement. The other is the issuance of all related municipal building permits, some of which have already been approved. Produce evidence that the St. John Theatre Company would produce evidence to the City of St. John of paid invoices associated with the construction of the exterior building. What this essentially means is confirmation that the project has started. Oh, sorry. Thanks. I thought you were just telling me to hurry up. So this is an important point. This is the start of the project. So this is not at the end of the project. We wanted to ensure that there was conditions that supported the project at the front end and not just gave all funding at the back end. So this allows for the project to be started and then that could be released at that time. successful submission and staff approval of a business plan, which will be detailed in a fund agreement, and then that St. John Theatre Company would demonstrate the City of St. John's commitment through a successful, I'll say this again, St. John Theatre Company demonstrating to the City of St. John that it has received successful approval for all funding of the exterior building envelope. And just to clarify, this is a $20 to $22 million project. The exterior building envelope is only a component of that. There's a lot of interior finishings that this project calls for. We're only interested in the confirmation of the exterior envelope funding. And then from there, we're moving on to the additional pieces, which would be familiar to many of you because it was part of the Growth Committee recommendation. So the complete financial, that the city would have the ability to complete a financial audit, that the theater company would submit an annual outcomes report to the city throughout the duration of the project. There's an HST component there, which really just allows a provision to hold back any portions of the city's investment, in case HST, that to ensure any non-refundable HST is paid from the grant and not with additional funds. And we're wrapping up here. Two more. The St. John Theatre Company must notify the City of St. John of any significant scope or design alterations. So that would also be part of the funding agreement. And just for council's comfort, it would ultimately be in council's authority to decide that they're uncomfortable if the scope change was too large to allow for the same amount of funding. So there'd be a discussion at that stage if it was such a large change. Listen, and this is not intended to be micromanaging at all. If there's, 40 windows and there's only 38, that's not a substantial change that would require us to coming back to council. And lastly, that the City of St. John and the St. John Theatre Company come to an agreement on a satisfactory recognition of this important municipal investment into the project. And with that, I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Director Ouellette from my team? Yes, Councillor Hickey, over to you, 3 minutes.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have no timer on here, so I know
Oh,
you
you
came
don't?
after me on
I'm
111.
gonna trade mine
but
for
I can't
yours.
tell how long I'm talking for. I am no doubt long-winded. I'm aware of that. Through you to Phil. That is a lengthy recommendation, Phil. Wow. I guess my only question is, I understand certainly the need and supported this when it came through finance, the need to make sure that those checks and balances were in place to look after this investment. I wonder if the reporting on it, well, I understand, obviously our contribution is significant for us, but the project scope as a whole is quite impressive. I think, with a, what is it, $50 million plus price tag on how much, 25, that's what it is, sorry. With a $25 million price tag on it, we're, while not an insignificant amount, we're not a major player in there. I just wonder, is the reporting that's captured in there, does that exceed or match what other funders would be putting forward for that reporting? Like, is that matching, say, the feds or any of those other major funding partners through this project? Does it create extra checks and balances for them?
And through your worship to Councillor Hickey, that was certainly not the intention to create more burdensome. And in fact, one of the recommendations is for an outcomes report, and really that would be an opportunity for this, if this was successful, for this entity to come back to council on an annual basis and share the progress of the report, building that relationship, building that familiarity of where things are going. So, when connecting with Stephen on this, that seemed like a very reasonable approach. And from a business plan, they're assembling a business plan currently, and we look forward to receiving it. So we'll integrate some of the conditions that we'd like to see as part of that business plan into the
Sure, and is there flexibility, I guess, with them for that, so that they're not having to jump over extra hoops beyond what pretty well practiced other funding partners are matching?
Through your worship to the councillor, there's certainly no intention here to make this overly burdensome. And really the exercise that was completed here, I think we've really achieved something great. Growth Committee really dealt with the policy on this, and Finance Committee also dealt with the policy from a financial standpoint and came up with what I believe is a strong recommendation for thoroughness as well as delivery.
Thank you, Councillor. Go ahead, City Manager.
Your worship, through you to the councillor, just to add on, we've exposed to you in the recommendation here a number of things, in fact, the majority of things that would be in the funding agreement. And quite frankly, most times we do not expose that to you. They're just in the funding agreement, and when the funding agreement comes to you, you review and make your decision. We did it this evening simply because it's such a major investment and has gone through two different committees, that we wanted to show the consolidation. At the end of the day, I would characterize it as all the recommendations that you see up there are perfectly normal for the sort of funding agreements we enter into when we provide these amounts of money to external agencies. And we have learned that these requirements are necessary based on previous lessons learned. So to Director Willette's point, I don't think we're being overly burdensome. It is our understanding that the St. John Theatre Company understands the requirements and will work with us towards achieving them. And it does protect the city's investment as we move forward. So for that reason, that's why we're quite comfortable with it. And again, the level of detail here tonight is probably not what you would normally see, because it would just be in the funding agreement when that comes to you. But we wanted to give you the full meal picture this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess just specifically, I have no idea how much time I have left, Your Worship. Probably not a lot. But I'd just say, look, yeah, I think Stephen illustrated the impact that these projects are having on our community, and recreation facilities like this and public facilities like this are what drives our growth and what drives our bottom line at the end of the day in the city. We've seen the impact that projects like the BMO Theatre are having. We've seen the impact that the spin-offs of it are having, whether it's Fundy, Fringe, all of those impacts that are having in our community. That's what's drawing people to our central core. That's what continues to build whole neighborhoods, build neighborhoods that people can do all their activities in and make sure that's encompassed there. And I think this is a really core part of it. And I'm very proud that the city's stepping up to support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go to you, Councillor Killen, I'll just mention that the city manager mentioned it, that it came through Councillor Killen's committee, Growth, and it came through Finance Committee, Councillor Sullivan's. And this is why it's literally called Consolidated Recommendation. That's why it's so large. It's all amalgamated. So over to you, Councillor Killen.
That's exactly what I wanted to call out. Thank you, Your Worship, is that this was really an interesting process for me and the Growth Committee to go through and give that sort of artsy, growthy look at it, and then have Finance absolutely poke a bunch of holes. But I think that's really good, right? I think that's exactly what we need. It can't just be the just artsy, creative folks running the show. We need those smart finance brains to come in and show us the best way forward for all of our constituents and our citizens, right? So I think this was a great path. And I hope that, going forward as, if on these big items, on these bigger things, that I can continue to work with my, co-chair, Councillor Sullivan over there on bringing the realism to some of these harebrained schemes we have. So I appreciate that, because it means things can actually come to fruition. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Well said. Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. First of all, I wanted to thank staff. I know staff have done a lot of work on this file, especially a huge shout out to CFO Fudge. It's incredible. If you haven't looked at it, to the residents at home, I would recommend just taking a quick gander at his file on this. He has crossed his T's and dotted his I's to make sure that all the due diligence is done for the taxpayers on this. I just wanted to make mention, like I did in finance, that I really have a lot of respect for Mr. Tobias. He does some incredible work. I love going to the shows as often as I can when I have time. And the architectural design to repurpose a heritage building is absolutely beautiful. They do have an absolutely incredible, and I know they're a very active board. However, my problem with this item is that unfortunately, we're not able to look after much of our own infrastructure. Like, for example, 14 and a half Cafe, that building has mold in it, and this council is not doing anything about it yet. It's my understanding TD Station needs a new roof. The Aquatic Center needs a complete overhaul. And so I think, we do have a finance policy that says to look after your roof before you buy living room furniture. It doesn't say to look after somebody else's roof before you look after your own. So that's where I stand on this. But don't take it the wrong way. It's not because I don't think the project is great. It's just that we don't have deep pockets to be able to fund this. But thank you once again to staff. You've done a great job looking at every viewpoint on this and from council's direction. So,
Councillor Sullivan, over to you.
Thanks, Your Worship. Jesus, it's like we scripted the order. It was perfect. Growth. Councillor Radwin is our financial conscience, which is awesome. And she's very important on the Finance Committee. And I'll kind of maybe hit the other end of the pendulum, but certainly to follow up with a thank you on the staff that worked on this. I know in the Finance Department, it was many hands and looking at deep dives, but I think this was a very interesting process. And I think it's showing our committee system works. We often talk about, who does the what and who does the how, and certainly Growth had the recommendation of, look, this is something we want to do. This is a what, this is what we want to do. And for finance, it was, okay, how can we make this happen within our financial plan that protects us and makes sure that, every week we aren't giving away $818,000 of the taxpayers' money. And so I think that worked out really well. I should explain for the public who may even try to understand what the two blah blah is, but in finance we try to talk about our house, and really instead of saying we're going to put $100,000 and hope we have $100,000 to spend next year and the year after and the year after and the year after, because then that gets into who's mowing the grass if we take $100,000 presupposed out of the budget. What we've said is we're going to take it out of our savings account, and we want to make sure that we have enough in our savings account to look after our stuff in-house. The good news is we've been pretty good with our financial plan over the last few years. So we have green check marks when we're checking our savings account. So as long as we keep doing well with it and we have that $100,000 in our savings account, we can make that continued commitment. And I really applaud our staff for the creativity to come up with that, because that's really how you manage a responsible household, as opposed to saying, we'll have it next year. So that I really appreciate that, and that's really what number 2 is about. For me, one of the other concerns that I have, I have loved this project, from the first time. Mr. Tobias probably emailed me about it 5 or 6 years ago. But I am always cognizant of many good organizations that come in front of us and need money, and many of them do wonderful work. We have limited capacity. I guess I would say this. We haven't had another organization coming regularly for the last 5 years to give us updates on a project that they've been putting together that will better our community. So for anybody who is thinking St. John Common Council is giving away money, if you start now, we might be ready for your ask around 2027. Because of that, and I mentioned the conversation earlier, because we do have a financial policy that says we won't borrow money and give it to others, right? And as many as there are other good projects, but that's tougher on our situation here, and we end up paying interest. That's why I enjoy the kind of the creative solution that's come up with here. But we do, in our capital plan, also look at a split of 85-15. I'm right, it is 85-15. That 85% of our capital needs to be the fixing the tennis courts. It needs to be maintaining the roads. But we also recognize that to grow, we have 15% in our policy in order to do new things. I really like the model of doing a new thing with trusted people who are established in St. John, have proven successful, and we don't have to send them a check to run it every year. No offense to the rinks, but we pay for the rinks. I love the field house. We helped build it. We don't have to keep paying for it, right? So I think this is the arts equivalent of the field house. The field house has been a great success. I see this being a wonderful success. Happy to be part of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. All right. It was an interesting evolution of how we came to get our recommendations through 2 different committees. It's the job of growth to chase growth and support growth, figure out how to grow, and it's the job of finance to, as you said, Councillor, to make sure that we have the voice of reason as well. And so it was a good exercise for us. We did ask staff to do something a little different than we have done. The great news is it will all happen within our own mandate. We aren't putting any money into anyone else's council, taking it from anyone else's council. It's all in ours. So I think it's a good move. So I will, oh, Deputy, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Deputy, go ahead.
It's okay, Your Worship. I was just going to move the recommendation.
Oh, go ahead then. Perfect. All right, so I have a mover in Councillor Killen. I'll have the second on the, okay, so hang on here. I got to check my list here. I don't have, that's, yeah. On the question? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Redmond, motion carried. Thank you so much. Next item, City Clerk.
Your Worship, next on the agenda is item 12.2. It's a staff report with respect to demolition of a vacant, dilapidated, and dangerous building at 134 Taylor Avenue.
Commissioner Hamilton, back over to you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you for consideration is a recommendation from staff to authorize demolition of a vacant and dangerous building at 134 Taylor Avenue. The building has been monitored as part of the city's dangerous and vacant building program since a fire occurred in the property in March of this year, and staff's ongoing efforts to have the property owner remedy the safety concerns with respect to the property have not been satisfied. Therefore, staff are back before council recommending moving forward with the demolition of the building. The city's vacant and dangerous buildings program aims to address safety hazards and improve the quality of life in St. John's neighborhoods. This program overall continues to demonstrate strong momentum, with the majority of cases being repaired and reoccupied, which is a key driver to support growth. And I would add that staff are also working on efforts, as council is aware, to enhance the program's outcomes, and will be reporting to Growth Committee later this fall. With that as an introduction, I will turn it over to Ben Purington, manager of the program, to provide an overview of the file before you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Common Council. I'll be providing a summary of the dangerous and vacant building file you have before you, item 12.2 of the agenda. There's one building on the premise at 134 Taylor Avenue, a 2-story multi-unit building located in the city's north end. The building was recently constructed with work beginning in September 2020. Prior to construction being completed, a fire event occurred in March 2022, causing severe damage to the building. Notice to comply was originally issued in April 2022 for hazardous conditions present as a result of the fire. The notice expired uncomplied with, and demolition was approved at the May 2nd meeting of Common Council. Following council approval, the owner addressed many of the hazards identified, or many of the immediate hazards outlined in the April notice. And furthermore, the owner had kept the building secured throughout the month of May and stated that they intended to begin repairs at the property within a couple of months. Due to the positive progress and the fact that the immediate hazards in the notice identified had been addressed, the city halted demolition action at the property. In order to ensure that the building was addressed, a new notice to comply was prepared and issued on June 28, 2022. The June notice included hazards found in a recent internal inspection, such as evidence of break-ins as well as significant water damage, among other items. Also, the building had been repeatedly found unsecured throughout the month of June, and the hazards associated with the building becoming unsecured were outlined in the June notice. The notice provided the owner with 30 days to commence repairs at the property. The owner did not comply within the time frame provided in the June notice, and the building has continued to be found unsecured in the time since the notice was issued. The building at 134 Taylor Avenue is a hazard to the safety of the public by reason of being vacant or unoccupied, by reason of dilapidation, and by reason of unsoundness of structural strength. And as a result, staff recommendation for the building is demolition. The following photos of the building can be found on pages 628 to 643 of the council package. So starting with some recent external photos from an August 16th inspection. And then internal photos from a May 26th inspection. So these are photos from the right side units if you're facing from Taylor Avenue. And the center units. And the left side units. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions on the file.
Thank you. I did drive over and take a look at it. Does anyone, yeah, I have Councillor Ogden has a question.
Ben, will the slab be torn down?
Through your worship to the councillor, during the initial recommendation, we had indicated that we would be taking the slab foundation. After further review, we've determined that we may be able to leave it. And we're going to take efforts to ensure that it remains, so that the property owner can repair the property starting from the foundation.
So this is a person who didn't follow through, and we're going to leave the slab there?
Through your worship to the councillor, in order to, there's once the building is taken down to the slab foundation, the hazards will be remedied at the property, and we'll be able to create a situation where the owner can move forward with a new build at the property, as well as minimize the potential damages as a result of the demolition by the city.
Because even the road there is in bad shape, and there's garbage across the street now. I've been down there a number of times with volunteers and cleaned up, and even the city park that's there, the benches are broken. We painted them and stuff like that. But these are people that should not be living in this type of situation. And if we don't have guarantees from the owner, you know, like we shouldn't allow neighborhoods to look like this. And I would be really hesitant to support anything where we're going to support something that shows that lack of respect for our community. So,
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy?
Yeah, this is one that really bothers me. I mean, I got to support, the recommendation. I wish, like, Councilor Ogden used the term slab, but it looks to me like there's a basement in this. Is that correct?
Through your worship to the council, there's no basement at the property. The slab foundation would be the bottom of the property.
Okay, so when it's all said and done, it's just going to be a place where you could probably play ball hockey. Is that what you're telling me? I don't know. I'm asking.
It'll be at that point, it'll be up to the property owner to maintain the property going forward, kind of thing. So.
When you were in discussions with the property owner, was there any indication that he'd be willing to sell it as it is to somebody who might want to fix it up?
Through your worship to the councillor, my understanding is that they're exploring all options available to them at the property. Their plan that we had discussed was that they wanted to repair the building fully and then sell it as a fully repaired building. But that plan, they were not able to make that plan come to fruition. I'm not sure what their plan would be moving forward with the property. With the slab foundation, it's likely that they will consider selling it.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Councillor Radwan?
Thank you, Mayor. Just like you used to do when you were councillor, I'm going to do the same thing. But thank you to staff for all the work that you've had to go through, unfortunately. The owner of this property is Viva Developments out of Moncton, and the registered owner of Viva Developments is Pierre Vautour. I'm very upset that a multi-million-dollar company that's been growing and growing around the city is not taking responsibility to look after this. And unfortunately, I do feel obligated to have to vote in favor of the demolition for this, because it does say in the staff report that people have been, there's evidence of people trying to start fires maybe to keep warm. Isn't that right, Mr. McKeel?
Through your worship to the councillor, and during the internal inspection, we did find what appeared to be a campfire in one of the units.
Yeah, and I mean, even for the sole purpose of trying to protect our firefighters, I would end up voting in favor of this. But the unfortunate thing is, even though the taxpayers' bill is going to go to the province to cover it, it still never covers our staff time. And I just wish that our staff had time to be focusing on other things. When you have big corporations responsible, they should be taking responsibility for their own properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Actually, everyone should be taking responsibility for their own properties. Councillor Ogden, back over to you.
I hope that you reconsider about the slab. I mean, it just shows a mark on that community that doesn't need to be there. It's just like the road back there is in bad shape, the garbage is all, and I know the province contacts the company to do the cleaning. I've been down there talking to them a number of times, and it doesn't always get done. But there is a responsibility, and it's like Victoria Street and Metcalf Street. We got buildings sitting there, and it's a terrible blight on the community, and it makes the community feel terrible about itself. And I really think we should demand that that slab come out of there, and because I don't have any faith in these developers to do anything right now. And I really hope that the staff will go back and look at that slab. It's just going to be a mark on the community, and I don't think that's fair. We wouldn't do this in the middle of a subdivision. We shouldn't be doing it in public housing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know if anybody wants to, from staff wants to clarify that, but I guess our obligation is to take down the dangerous part of the building, which is the part that'll fall down. A slab isn't going to fall down, so I'm assuming that that may not be paid back to the city. I don't know, but yes, go ahead, City Manager.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Ogden and the rest of Council. The Vacant and Dangerous Buildings Program, ultimate goal is to rebuild if possible, reoccupy, et cetera, et cetera. In this particular case, the building is not in any reasonable shape to rebuild. In fact, the photos to a degree are deceiving. You know, there's lots of comments about, oh, we could save the windows on the first floor. Well, the reality is the vinyl around those windows is all melted. So it looks like there might be some salvageable stuff, probably nowhere near as much as some people would imagine. But to the point about the slab, the staff will continue to work with the building owner. If we believe that by keeping the slab there, we have a potential to perhaps have someone rebuild more quickly, then that's why we would consider leaving the slab in place. If there is no potential, if we think that this slab is simply going to be there as an eyesore for a prolonged period of time, Councillor Ogden, then the staff recommendation would change, or we will change it, and we will take care of the slab as well. All right. But having a slab in place is a good incentive to whoever may wish to build next. So we don't want to remove it unless it is necessary to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Lowe?
Building insured, the more than it burnt?
Through your worship to the councillor, I guess it's not a simple yes or no question. I don't have all the details on the insurance, but the details that I do have, I know that there's a dispute ongoing as to whether there was insurance at the time or not. I don't have all the details on that dispute, and I wouldn't be able to provide them even if I did. But I can say that there's an ongoing dispute as to whether there was.
Does the owner know that it came to council tonight and we're voting to take it down or not to take it down? Does the owner know that?
The owner is aware that we came to council.
Councillor Harris?
Two quick things, Your Worship. One, to the city manager's point, are we going to put this on the developer notification list? We got a slab sitting here ready to rock, so does that qualify for that?
Through your worship to the councillor, it's something that we could certainly look into as to whether we could offer it through the developer notification.
Sweet, 'cause I love getting those emails and send it to people that I couldn't look at it for opportunities. And the other one, you know, I just think with pieces of infrastructure like this, as a builder in the past, I had to have insurance on me. So that if I was negligent and responsible for an accident of any kind, so somebody somewhere has to have insurance on this. And there has to be recourse and recompense somewhere. I just don't get how there's a dispute. You can't operate as a contractor without insurance. It doesn't mean you cover the whole building cost, but That doesn't make sense to me, how there can be a dispute about whether there was or whether there wasn't insurance. Because that would suggest to me that there's contractors that are working and getting permits that aren't licensed and insured.
Through your worship to the councillor, I will say that at the time that the fire had occurred, work had stopped at the property.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure if that answers your
Yeah,
question.
I get you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so before I call a vote, I have to read a statement. The information which has been provided in the council agenda package includes the report of the building inspector stating that the building located at 134 Taylor Avenue, PID 000-46375, is a hazard to the safety of the public by virtue of its being, amongst other things, dilapidated or structurally unsound. Is there present an owner, including anyone holding any encumbrance upon this property, who wishes to present evidence to the contrary, i.e., that the building is in fact structurally sound and not dilapidated? Anybody up there? No? Okay. So I will take a motion. You have a recommendation in your kit. Councillor Hickey and Councillor Radwan. On the question, all in favor? Against? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is under General Correspondence, item 15.1. It's a submission from Big Brothers Big Sisters with a staff recommendation beside the agenda item.
Councillor Hickey, Councillor Harris, moving the staff recommendation on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is item 15.2, Loch Lomond Villa sponsorship request. Recommendations in the agenda.
Recommendations in the agenda. Refer to clerk for purchase of tickets for anyone. Deputy, have a seconder. Councillor Killen, on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item.
15.3, a letter from A. Johnson on city branding. And the staff recommendation is receive for information.
Receive for information. Deputy's moving the recommendation. Councillor Sullivan, on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The city's in the process of doing their own branding exercise. Now we'll go towards for that. Go with that information. We'll go along there. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 15.4, submission from A. Johnson with respect to Envision St. John. Recommendation is to refer to Growth Committee for consideration.
Refer to Growth for consideration. Councillor Harrison, the deputy, on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
15.5, submission from A. Johnson with respect to upgrade to city standard outsource contracts. Recommendation received for information.
Got a motion, or a recommendation to receive for information. Councillor Killen and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. They are currently reinventing the process. What have I got written down here? The procurement process, so that will go to them as well, Mr. Johnson. Next item.
Next is item 15.6, a letter from Air Canada with dated August 2022. Recommendation is received for information.
Councillor Killen, deputy, on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Item 15.6 is a submission from C. Stevenson with respect to dangerous and vacant buildings list. Recommendation is to receive for information.
Pardon me? Okay. Oh, yep.
Thank you, Mayor. I was hoping to refer this to Growth Committee.
I've got the, hang on, the deputy is moving it. Do I have a seconder? On?
We've got to refer to growth, Councilor Radwan.
Oh, hold on. Oh, sorry. Okay. Councillor Red wants to refer it to the Growth Committee. Okay, do you have a seconder on that? Councillor Killen? Okay. On the question?
I just got a quick comment.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Radwan. I think we are looking at this. I mean, staff echoed back to us that the message is received loud and clear, but brings up a lot of good points about looking at the city. This letter from Keir Stevenson's brings up a lot of good points about how we identify those infill opportunities and what that looks like from a tax-based growth position and all that. So it is something I know other people have been talking about, so I think Growth Committee is a good place for it.
Okay. Yeah, when I read through that, I thought there was some information there that could connect more with staff than with council. Okay, so we'll send it off to Growth, if that's what everyone wants to do. It's got a motion to send it to Growth. On the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried, off to Growth. Next item, City Clerk.
Next are the items that were, that came from Committee of the Whole. And I realized in my notes there was one that I'll ask for a motion from council to add to the agenda. It was a resolution from Committee of the Whole with respect to Timber Top Adventure License Agreement.
Okay, on the question? For Timber Top, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
So just for clarity, Mayor, that was to get it onto the agenda, it would still need to be voted.
That's
Yep.
correct, yeah. And so in terms of, I realize the council member has declared a conflict with the two city market leases, so perhaps we could do those last. Would that
Okay.
be Okay.
First?
Do them first?
Yes,
Oh,
first.
they've left already. Okay, so the first one would be city market lease with Pete's Fruitique. And the resolution would read, be it resolved that the City of St. John renew the lease for stall 11 and ancillary spaces in the city market with 514807 NB doing business as Pete's Fruitique under the terms and conditions set out in the lease submitted with MNC 2022-249. And further be it resolved that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute any necessary documents.
Okay, 17.1. Deputy is moving it. Seconder, Councillor Sullivan. On the question? Oh, sorry, on the question, yes, Councillor Redwan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to quickly mention why all of a sudden I'm going to be supporting these two city market leases, just in general, because we don't have all the details in the council packet. I think that staff have made some very positive changes that will help enhance the sustainability of the market. I'm still hoping that there's going to be other changes made in the future, but I mean, everything is fine in the market leases, just to say in general. I just think there's ways to enhance our lease, that's all. But I really am so happy, and I want to thank staff for making these positive changes just to create more sustainability.
Thank you, Councillor. More changes to come. Okay, so on the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is another city market lease. This one's city market lease renewal with True North Salmon. And the resolution would be resolved that the city renew the lease for the stalls listed as B1 through B6 and ancillary spaces in the city market with True North Salmon, DBA North Market Seafood, under the terms and conditions as set out in the lease submitted with MNC 2022-258. And further be it resolved that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute any necessary documents.
Okay, on the question? No, I need a mover first. Is it almost 10? Councillor Sullivan. And the deputy. On the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next.
And Councillor Killen, I don't know if
There
she's
she is.
still back there.
Thank you.
Okay. And so the next item would be with respect to Timber Top Adventures, Inc. It's a recommendation from Committee of the Whole with respect to an amended license agreement, and the resolution reads that the city enter into an amended license agreement, and the form is presented to the Committee of the Whole at its August 22, 2022 meeting with Timbertop Adventures, Inc. to restructure the license fee payable to the city under the original license agreement dated November 4th, 2017, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the said amended license agreement and any document ancillary thereto.
License agreement for Timber Top. I have a mover and a seconder. I have Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is a recommendation from Committee of the Whole with respect to consent to sublease Reversing Falls Skywalk, Inc. to 735402 NB Inc. and Patrick Vaughn. And the resolution is that the city consent to a sublease of the premises at 200 Bridge Road, St. John, New Brunswick, identified as PID number 55155-487 and known as Reversing Falls Restaurant Site under the terms and conditions contained in the sublease presented to Committee of the Whole at its August 22nd, 2022 meeting, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any document necessary to effect the city's consent to the sublease.
Okay, any, Councillor Lowe, you're moving it, and Councillor Sullivan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
And the final one is the
No.
ground lease for Fundy Key, and it's another resolution from Committee of the Whole. And the recommendation from Committee of the Whole is that the city enter into a ground lease with Fundy Key Developments, Inc. in the form as presented to Committee of the Whole at its meeting of August 22, 2022 for the lease of the premises known as Fundy Key located off Water Street, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute the said ground lease and any other documents ancillary thereto or necessary to effect the transaction.
Ground lease for Fundy Key. Councillor Sullivan. Deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. All right, that looks like it did. Before I take a motion to adjourn, I just want to thank staff. It's been a bit rough for me. I don't know. I feel like I'm out of practice after a month. But we did have a couple of employees who started their vacation at 4:30 on Friday afternoon, and that's Tim O'Reilly and Richard Evans, and we're both here tonight. So thank you to both of you, because that's a great commitment to your city. So I will now call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Lowe and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.